reports from select committees, first readings of bills. Utilities. Yes.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the first reading of the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill 2023.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read here first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 11. In the name of the Honourable Senior Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, to move the second reading of the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill 2023.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to, in pursuance of the movement of the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill. This matter, sir, at face value is a deceptively simple and straightforward one. If, however, given context, it proves to be extremely consequential and perhaps, I should add, highly transformative in nature and in its potential. As a point of departure, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to give you some of that context because it is important that the country understands specifically what is the public mischief or what are the public mischiefs that we are here to correct. What are the public mischiefs, obviously, therefore, that exist, and what is the public policy intervention that is being advanced. And I begin, Mr. Speaker, not today, but last week at the closure of the Global Environmental Summit, which is called the Conference of the Parties, so-called COP. And that meeting, sir, is significant and has tremendous significance and relevance to us in Barbados for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to begin, sir, by not only locating it there, but also expressing my own profound concern about the very glib way in which persons with influence and responsibility in this country are approaching matters which are now understood to be touching on the global concern for our continued safe existence as a species, humanity. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, 199 parties to the Conference of the Parties agreed for the first time on 3 fundamentals. The first one is not so much of a big deal because we live this reality and we know it every year, that there has to be compensation for loss and damage. And it is a concept, sir, because government in Barbados usually has to step in, as we stepped in when we had our last hurricane, sir. And almost every time you have a tropical storm and you lose some houses and so on, and vast majority of the people are underinsured or uninsured, then government has to come in and try to lend the support so that people can get themselves back to a condition where they previously were as best as is possible. It is now understood that there's going to be an operationalization of a loss and damage fund, which will see, sir, the world's leading powers, the industrial powers, who are the principal polluters, contributing to this fund. But above and beyond that, Mr. Speaker, the issue for us, which is of greater significance and more immediate concern in relevance to this particular matter before the House, is the commitment to dedicate some $13 billion, billion with a B, to the Green Climate Adaptation Fund. And that, sir, is to finance the process of adapting to the climate crisis which the world is facing. And then, sir, thirdly, that there has to be a transition away from fossil fuels. Now, we've been talking about this for a long time, but for the first time last week, there has been a global understanding that there is to be a transition away from the use of fossil fuels, sir, and a tripling of renewable energy investment around the world. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have stood in this place. The Prime Minister has stood in this place. I believe that he who now acts as the Attorney General of Barbados, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, has stood in this place when he was Minister of Energy, or Minister of Energy in the Senate, sir. We have, as a government, sent signals repeatedly to this country and to stakeholders within the electricity sector. My friend, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, in his capacity as Minister responsible for town planning, sir, has done it as well. And we have urged that heed be paid because this moment had to come. And that the advantage that little Barbados had prior to this moment was a first mover advantage. Because it was important to recognize, and continues to be important to recognize, that in an ocean of demand for inverters, synchronizers, the balancing materials to balance the grid, synchronous condensers, I think that's what they're called, the transformers, and then, of course, the batteries for solar PV, sir, so that we can maintain grid stability. In that ocean of demand, which existed before last week, sir, little Barbados becomes irrelevant because the scale at which we are trying to purchase is so small. But it becomes even worse for us, sir, when now an announcement is made that you're going to triple renewable energy investment and that the whole world has signed on. Don't mind what a few people will continue to mutter about. The whole world now signs on to a movement away from fossil fuels. So, to put it in very simple terms, we going down breakneck hill, full speed, no brake, no brakes on. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality is Barbados has to be in a position to satisfy the demand that we have to satisfy. But we did not, and the government, sir, the government does not get involved in investment in transformers. The government does not get involved in the investment in modernizing the grid. The government does not get involved, Mr. Speaker, sir, in purchasing and bringing into the country synchronous condensers and so on for stabilizing and modulating frequency of electricity service across the island. That's a private sector thing. That's what the Light and Power is there to do. And I have been, in fact, sir, at odds only by virtue, I think, of style and preference for delivery of the concern between my friend and Christchurch West, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch West and myself, when I was Minister of Energy, sir, because he spoke frankly, truthfully, clearly, candidly about some concerns that we all have, sir, about the pace at which the utility in Barbados has been moving forward on its part of this journey with respect to the renewal and modernization of the Barbados grid. For my part, sir, I felt it was better to reason behind closed doors. My friend would tell me, sir, that we perhaps were good cop and bad cop. I don't know if that is the appropriate analogy to use. But coming from the same place, and Mr. Speaker, we are now at a point, sir, where having not properly girded our loins, having not properly paid heed to caution coming from government quarters, Mr. Speaker, sir, Barbados confronts floodgates that are now open worldwide, and there is a rush for global investment in renewable energy. In what was a high demand environment there before, sir, we are now positioned, or if we don't take the action we are taking today, we will be positioned exactly where we were in the dark days of the pandemic, when because we wanted so few vaccines, The suppliers of vaccines say, you are too small to matter. You're not ordering at scale. There are people who are ordering at greater scale. I am not diverting my industrial development plan to accommodate little you. I got to deal with continental Europe. I have to deal with continental United States of America. I got to deal with continental Australia, et cetera, continental Africa. And what we had to do, sir, was to find partners. We did that with the African community, the African Union. And Mr. Speaker, sir, as I speak, you will realize that part of what we are doing today is building partnership as well, so that we can unleash the renewable energy potential that this country has. There is obviously, therefore, sir, I think you could infer from what I've said thus far, that the large gap between the amount of technology that is demanded and the amount of technology that is available, in fact, is now going to expand exponentially. Barbados, sir, must be ready. And we must be ready, sir, because if we are not, the nation, quite frankly, faces a severe peril and a danger. Global demand can increase overnight, sir. I want to be clear about that. Global demand probably has increased already overnight. Global production, however, and certainty of supply cannot increase overnight. It is true to say that global demand can and will increase overnight, but the availability of finance cannot increase overnight. And that is why our Prime Minister has persistently been warning this country to take the matter of renewable energy seriously. She has lent her time, her energy, her voice, her spirit, her strength to carrying on her back the concerns of small island developing states such as ours, sir, into global fora across the planet, Mr. Speaker, for us and our perilous position to be recognized. Now, having said that, I perhaps also should express in this House, sir, my own deep concern, and I think the concern of those of us in the government as a whole, over the obstruction to progress which we recognize exists in Barbados, the conspiracy of silence, and the studious dedication not to support the government's efforts in this regard. And this is a curious thing, Mr. Speaker. It is a very curious thing because we're talking about a Barbadian community. We're talking about people who navel string bury right here. We're talking about people who carry a Barbados ID card and a Barbados passport. And one would expect, at a minimum, a certain degree of loyalty to the country of your birth. I do not know how it profits a man or woman, sir, to have as their only contribution on this matter that is an existential crisis to humanity. Not just to Barbados, but to humanity. This year, sir, all of us saw the papers, all of us read, I believe, the international news. We know that parts of the world saw the hottest temperatures ever. We know that parts of the world saw the wettest conditions, the greatest degree of flooding ever. As recently as yesterday, or day before yesterday, I believe, sir, Australia saw a phenomenal degree of flooding, that airplanes on an airport, parked at an airport, sir, were inundated with water. Imagine, sir, Grantley Adams International Airport so flooded that aircraft sitting on the airport are on the tarmac are flooded out. Can't water over the wings of the plane. That's what Australia saw. And in all of this, Mr. Speaker, sir, the contribution from those people who claim to be an opposition voice. Now, the public didn't give them the seat in here, and perhaps the public knows why. But those people who claim to be an opposition voice, well, she's fly about too much. That's the sum total of that which is offered. She always flying about. Everything she's saying, come out, she mouth, is climate change. It is a level, sir, of idiocy that is startling. And it is beneath the high standards that this ancient parliament, this is the oldest, third oldest parliament in the Commonwealth, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is below the standards that we have held, especially, sir, when it comes to an issue which is as critical as this. Now, sir, I mentioned just now the fact that global demand obviously is going to increase when once you say that you're moving away from fossil fuels as a globe and that you are now committing yourself to tripling the renewable energy investment as a globe, Mr. Speaker, sir. But small island developing states such as ours need major investment in renewable energy technology. And we have to do it, sir, and recognize at the same time that it can't only be governments that are going to finance this journey, because it is not within the capacity, let's start here, it is not within the capacity of the government of Barbados to finance this journey by ourselves. Structurally, our economy does see a private entity holding the utility of Barbados, supplying energy to the country, electrical energy. Structurally, Mr. Speaker, sir, our economy is structured so that we have an independent agency, which is a FTSE. And there are a regulatory agency, Fair Trade Commission. FTC, a Fair Trade Commission, Mr. Speaker, sir. It ain't about the government of Barbados alone. But around the world, sir, people are recognizing that if we have a threat to every country on the planet, if we're going to solve this threat, we have to have serious conversation at public policy levels, whether you're in government or out of government, whether you're an aspirant or you are already an occupant of a seat in the House of Assembly of your country or the Congress of your country, you are expected to join in the conversation in a mature and serious way on behalf of mature and serious bodies of people around the world, Mr. Speaker. And part of the problem we face in Barbados is that we do this alone. The government does it by itself. The government has no benefit of any voice out there sharing an opinion on this matter. There's no input, sir, from any of them, not one of the entities that found themselves asking for votes in the last election. I invite you, Mr. Speaker, sir, to point me in the direction of one entity, one individual even, that has offered an idea on the way forward. But while that sterile environment exists in Barbados, sir, what is the world discussing? The world is looking, Mr. Speaker, sir, at fundamental issues. Issues, for example, along the lines of the fact that all of us pay insurance premium. Truth is that when you do the economic research, you find that over $7 billion United States currency, global premium were paid during the course of last year, Mr. Speaker. But insurance company, $7 trillion. But Mr. Speaker, sir, no insurance company is at the table on this matter of climate change. So when we say that public funds cannot be relied upon, and therefore you have to find new ways of financing, which is something that our Prime Minister has been leading across intellectual thought leadership around the world, carrying that argument, sir, into capitals like France's capital, Paris, carrying that argument, sir, into Dubai, carrying that argument around the world, sir, IMF meetings, World Bank meetings. We have to bring, this is what she's preaching, the need to bring private capital to the table, Mr. Speaker, sir, so that we are in a position to ease the burden on domestic governments. Because we're all in this together. Then a climate for the government that don't impact climate for the private sector. But in a context, sir, where you have $7 billion globally in insurance premium being paid every year, Mr. Speaker, there is not a single insurance company at the table. We recognize that last year, over 3 billion passengers flew. But there is no contribution flew different destinations around the world. But there's no contribution being paid, no discussion about how we can get international air transport companies to be contributing to this issue of climate change. But they are helping pollute the planet. Mr. Speaker, sir, the oil and gas companies saw $4 billion in profits last year, $4 billion in profit. That's profit alone. Surely they too should be asked to make a contribution to this issue of mutual concern for the planet which we share. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, I begin by contextualizing this legislation there, because it is about not just the naked 2-3 lines of the legislation, but the broader context, one, and secondly, getting the people of Barbados to come to an understanding, even at this Christmas time when we are busy looking at all the other things that we must look at in the celebration of Christmas, sir, and the commemoration of the birth of our Lord and Savior, that there are serious issues which this government has been leading, and about which parts of this society upon whom we have to place a burden of expectation. Because, sir, there is an expectation that civil society has a voice in this matter. There's an expectation, sir, that the journalistic community must do more than find ways to condemn a government, but should have an avenue of interest in uplifting a country's gaze, in lifting the gaze of a country to issues of collective concern for this country. There's an expectation, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the trade unions in Barbados must have an interest in this matter. And I have already spoken to those people who are in the political opposition, and perhaps that is more infertile soil, and I would not spend much time on them. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, where has the government been going? The government, through its leader, the Prime Minister, has led arguments globally for the longer tenor of loans, saying to us, and she said it here in the House, 15-year loans are not going to assist her in rebuilding the schools in Barbados, sir, making them newer and resilient to climate, retrofitting those which currently exist and making them resilient to the climate issues. Why is it important that I say that? It is important, sir, because only a few months ago there were people who were banging down the door of the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, demanding that schools have cooling systems, classrooms have cooling systems, because the temperature in the classroom was such that children, sir, were unable to concentrate and do their work, rendering productivity in the classroom impossible, rendering, sir, learning difficult. That's the reality. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we say that those retrofitting, that rebuilding, that building of resilience capacity, sir, comes at great cost, it means, sir, that therefore governments must be able to access money at a longer tenor. It also means, Mr. Speaker, sir, that issues that we have fought battles for, like getting industrial powers to commit to green climate financing and dedicating new money to loss and damage, that type of intellectual thought leadership that the government has been leading, the Prime Minister of Barbados has been carrying on her back across the world, Mr. Speaker, sir. These are the hard-fought and hard-won victories that came out of the Conference of Parties last week. I do not know of any article I have seen in any newspaper, Barbados, sir, which has sought to connect these things to the reality of what we are facing as a people in this country. And it is relevant to Barbados. I will insist that it is relevant in Barbados, because every sector bar none in this country is now impacted by this crisis. As I turn to my right, sir, I see the Honourable Member who has responsibility for town planning. You know, sir, he must now plan or approve plans that take into consideration matters that never before were of concern. When it comes before him, Mr. Speaker, sir, there must now be, on his department, there must now be consideration, sir, of resilience. Building for the future must be resilient building. Roofing, retrofitting, and roof strapping, Mr. Speaker, sir. Installation of solar PV so that the house itself can help to be climate resilient and at the same time help the owner, occupier to pay a mortgage. Ventilation issues, Mr. Speaker, sir. Drainage is another one. Mr. Speaker, sir, across from me is the Minister of Education. As I just indicated, the issue before her is going to be cooling systems in schools, keeping our classrooms sufficiently climate resilient that our children can learn. And Mr. Speaker, sir, across from me, a member for St. George North must be concerned in her professional capacity about the fact that in the same way that countries such as Saudi Arabia and countries like the United Arab Emirates and countries like China are now relooking their labor legislation, sir, to say that, look, there are certain types of jobs where people outside working all day. Is it fair to that laborer? Is it fair to that worker to be working in conditions, Mr. Speaker, where the temperature is so high that they are rendered unproductive and unsafe in their work environment as well? And what are the legislative interventions? It's already said you got a building to go and do, and a man go up on the roof and he fixing the roof. These are the simple things that we in Barbados need to start to understand and talk about. Because the man who's sent up there and working at 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, sir, is endangering himself, his life, sir. And then there's another challenge which is faced on the government, sir, because of the health care consequential upon that. And what have some people had to do? Change the hours of time. So you're working into the night now as opposed to doing that thing right through the day. These are the things, sir, that we cannot remain silent about, but we have an opposition in this country that has no offertory. I don't know if you've ever been in church, Mr. Speaker, sir, and seen a man come around. When the collection plate is passed in front of him, he turn his face. They're like, "Good, somebody can hear about that." There are those who do that. There's no offering, no offering. And that's how the country is being treated. There's nothing, and if it is that they have nothing to offer, why are they humbugging? Why did they humbug people to come in this place 2 years ago? Or why do they continue to go and issue squalid noises on social media? In the safe confines of a social media space where they can only pollute the atmosphere but not offer anything constructive, Mr. Speaker. Agriculture, another thing comes to my mind. Poultry production in this country, sir, we are and have been at a level of self-sufficiency, poisoning ourselves now for export. And you know what happened this year, Mr. Speaker, sir? We lost thousands of birds. Why? Because the climate circumstance in which those birds are being raised, sir, they die. Got to fix that problem, because we can't be exporting, aiming to export, and losing them by the thousands and tens of thousands. Mr. Speaker, sir, and you can go on and on. Public transportation. Barbados has beaten its chest. Everybody in Barbados has felt a sense of pride and expressed that sense of pride, except, of course, for those people in George Street about our electric buses, Mr. Speaker, sir. But how many electric minibuses, how many electric ZRs are there in this country? Three, Mr. Speaker. So that journey now begins because there are about 800 of them on the road, at least. And we got 3. How many hired cars in Barbados electric yet, Mr. Speaker, sir? And you go on and on. The transformative process has to take place. And the conspiracy of silence and the dedication being given to non-support of this government on this journey, sir, is completely unacceptable and utterly regrettable. Because we are bigger and better than this as a country. We're going to do what we have to do as a government in the interest of the national imperative. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not a happy report to have to make. No, sir. Beyond the obvious situation of the climate crisis, I must speak to you a little bit about the fact that we are here as well because of the economic realities. As Energy Minister, sir, I have had to repeatedly say to the country, now, one of the reasons why, when I was Energy Minister, I used to say, one of the reasons why we have to go on this journey, sir, is because our fuel import bill is strangling us. Now, everybody in Barbados chooses to close their ears to that. What they want to hear is, how is government going to intervene so that the price of gas at the pump will be cheaper and therefore allow me to drive out more with less penalty and pain in my pocket. That's what the people of Barbados want to discuss. This country, sir, does not want or seems not to be keen on having the discussion, sir, about carpooling. I was called all sorts of things, sir, when I suggested carpooling. The only thing I was not called was Kerry Simmons. But I stand on the four corners of the argument because I see them carpooling in industrial powers that are producers of oil and gas. We import it. They produce it, sir. They refine it, and they still can carpool to save money. We got to import it, sir. But Barbados special and different. There will come a point in time, sir, when people are going to stop, just rush into the social media and pause for thought. That time, sir, I want to be sooner rather than later. Because invariably, when these transformations in our behavior take place, it is because, sir, we are being visited with pain. I would want us not to be visited with the pain. But the pain, sir, is manifested in the fuel import bill. The pending, coming pain is manifested. In 2018, Mr. Speaker, sir, this country spent $580 million in importing fuel for Barbados to operate on. $580 million in 2018. In 2019, sir, it was 500, and that dropped by $1 million or so, $579 million. Mr. Speaker, sir, COVID came along in 2020, and we dropped down to 430 million. But that's because nothing was happening. The economy came virtually to a standstill. So then the cars on the road driving about, you remember there was lockdown. 2021, sir, we started to come out of COVID, and the fuel import bill soared from 430 million to 525 million. We're still coming out of COVID. Last year, Mr. Speaker, we're out of COVID. Business as usual. 2018, it was 580 million. Do you know where we were last year, sir? 914 million. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, my friend, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, is the mathematician, and he would tell you, sir, that that is a 113 or so percent, 113% increase. 113% increase. And that's why I say to you, Mr. Speaker, that this country has to start to take itself seriously. Because the conversation that the opposition elements out there want to encourage is a conversation that says, don't mind how much the fuel import bill go up by, government must come in and shield you from it. So the government, sir, must now shield 113% increase. The good news is, Mr. Speaker, sir, we substantially did that. We intervened at the petrol pump, and we shielded people at the level of the petrol pump. We intervened in the home, Mr. Speaker, sir, and we made sure that below a certain amount of kilowatt usage of electricity, you are shielded from the full throughput cost. We have intervened to shield the consumer. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, common sense will dictate that if you have a $914 million expense today, as opposed to when you come into government at $580 million for the same product, you can't continue to have that 113% increase repeated year after year after year, and that the government will always be in a position to shield the consumer. And are we on course to repeating it? Mr. Speaker, sir, last year was 914 million. October of 2023, we had already spent $830 million, that's October, on importing fuel. So we are on the course to equal it, if not surpass that cost this year, Mr. Speaker. And again, there comes a point in time where a community of people must sit down now and start to pool their thoughts and say, does this approach make sense? And if it does not make sense, what is the policy alternative? Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, 113% increase in fuel bill imports has grim consequences for everybody in Barbados who want to benefit from public housing. The money got to come from somewhere. It's only one pool of money. Do we choose to spend it on the importation of fuel and petroleum product, or do we choose to spend it, Mr. Speaker, sir, on improving public housing, improving public transport, improving the sporting facilities of the country, retrofitting our schools so that our children are not sweltering in 35-degree heat in a classroom, Mr. Speaker, sir. Ensuring that the hospital is better able to deliver services that the hospital must deliver. Ensuring that the sports minister, sir, can light every single playing field and can put in bleachers on as many playing fields as possible in Barbados and can have community parks across this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. Those are the issues, those are the developmental issues from which we cannot deviate, but about which we must find resources to deliver. That the Attorney General of Barbados and the people responsible for justice, law, and order in the country have a constabulary properly equipped to be able to answer and respond to crisis. Those are the issues, Mr. Speaker. Are we going to spend the money in circumstances where we could find an alternative? Are we going to spend money at a rate of over 100% increase in fuel and petroleum product? Or are we going to look after the other things that matter to our people? Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am very candid about these things because we have a nightmare. We have a nightmare taking place in this country where too many are prepared to turn a blind eye to the absence from the discourse of the folks who are marauding as sincere people of political good intention, those people located primarily in George Street and one or two other corners of the country. I am saying to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the volatility in prices of fuel imports has been a historical characteristic in the Barbados energy sector. It isn't something new that happened yesterday or 2018 and between 2018 and now. We've always known the volatility of prices, Mr. Speaker, and we have had to find a way to fix it. Now, when the Honourable Member for Christchurch East was endowed with the responsibility of being Energy Minister in 2018, by 2019, to his credit, he had come to this House with the Barbados National Energy Plan. That plan was laid in this place in 2019, Mr. Speaker, sir, in order for us to get a grip on the transformation of the energy sector. That plan, Mr. Speaker, contemplated a new thrust in renewable energy that would be premised on a mix of technology being deployed across Barbados. We were going to use solar PV, solar photovoltaic, which we did. We were going to use wind energy, which we have started to do. We were going to have wind both onshore, sir, and offshore. Mr. Speaker, sir, we were going to use biomass technology, well in advanced stage of planning. The energy part is in the closing stages of negotiation. Mr. Speaker, sir, in addition to that, there was an integrated resource and resilience plan, so-called IRRP. I have heard some people who are either critics of the government or critics of the process, who are perhaps not well advised, complain that there's no plan. I want to arrest that nonsense because the integrated resource and resilience plan obviously is a plan. It is a roadmap, sir, as to how we deploy the energy mix. And I just outlined to you what the energy mix is, or it was intended to be across the country. The plan, sir, envisaged that at 2030, Barbados will be 100% fossil fuel free. In other words, the importation that I just told you about, those ridiculous and astronomical prices which we continue to pay, we would have that 900 or $1 billion off of our backs. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, sir, how your constituency could benefit if Barbados government did not have to start every year by putting one side $1 billion or thereabouts, but could then take that $1 billion and deploy it in a way that help you look after the people who send you to this place. Huh? And that is foreign exchange, sir, that I'm talking about. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the plan also spoke to battery storage as an indispensable part of the country's energy mix. An indispensable part. And you may ask, sir, well, what is it about battery storage that makes it indispensable. Battery storage, sir, in fact, not just battery, storage full stop, because the technology is advancing every day, and there are those who are here in Barbados talking to the government now about a thing called pump storage. But electrical storage, Mr. Speaker, sir, is an ancient concept. It ensures grid stability. That means, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you can have rapid injection of energy into any point of the national grid at a time, sir, where you have to compensate for shortfalls to meet the demand. I hope I'm making myself clear. Storage facilitates that rapid injection of energy to stabilize the grid so that you don't have a fluctuation because you are unable to meet demand. Why is that important? Because sometimes I feel that we get too technical. If a man is lying down in Queen Elizabeth Hospital undergoing open heart surgery, you do not want, sir, while the surgeon is in the midst of his work, for the lights to go off, the suction to stop, the monitors shut down, Mr. Speaker, sir, and all hell break loose. If an aircraft, sir, is about to land at Grantley Adams International Airport, you do not want the runway to be plunged into immediate darkness. The tower can't communicate effectively with the plane and vice versa, Mr. Speaker, sir, and all hell break loose. It's a fairly simple thing. And because we have to make sure as a government that we do more than just find things to complain about, and it is an relatively easy task to just find things to complain about. You know, as ornate and immaculate as this building is, sir, having stood the test of time for hundreds of years, there are folks in George Street who will come in here and find a way to pick at every single beam and make it seem like the worst thing that was ever done by mankind anywhere in the world, because there are specialists, sir, at that and only that. But we have a plan, sir, that obviously exists and has to be operationalized. And in the operationalizing of the plan, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have come up with some technical challenges. And as a government that refuses to hide things, as a government that is rooted in principles of transparency, we come to the country and say candidly, these are the problems with which we've been confronted. Problem number one, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there were expectations in the plan. Obviously, when the plan is drafted, those people who draft the plan are anticipating certain levels of performance in the Barbados economy. Now, Barbados economy post-2019 grew at an unexpected rate. Equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, as the economy buoyed significantly, demand for the new technology grew at an unexpected rate. So that we as a government and as a people, let's forget the government, because if I say government, there are those people who bristle, because they're suggesting that the Honourable Member for St. James Central is applauding the government about which he's a part, and how dare he do that? So let us just talk about the people of Barbados. The people of Barbados, sir, enjoyed economic growth between 2019 and today. And so therefore, sir, the performance of the economy of Barbados exceeded the expectations of the people who drafted the Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan. That, for many countries, is a good problem to have. How dare I say that? But, sir, for many countries, that would be, because we did better than was expected. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, the difficulty, therefore, is that you have to understand now what the consequences of that expectation, the exceeding of your expectations are. I taking time because I want every person in every village of this country to understand. Mr. Speaker, sir, in 2030, the ambition was, according to the plan as originally designed, that by 2030, we would have 280 megawatts of electricity, renewable energy on our grid. By 2030, that was the ambition. But Mr. Speaker, sir, by June of 2023, we had already got 206 megawatts on the grid. You understand what I'm telling you? The planners envisaged that by 2030, 7 years from now, we will be at 280 megawatts of renewable energy. By 2023 June, we were already at 206 megawatts, sir. So that the additional 74 megawatts would have been almost an inevitability by the time you get to the end of the year, and in fact was. So that we were exceeding expectations at a galloping rate. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, sir, planned investment at town planning, ably managed by the member for Christchurch West, amounts to 450 megawatts. Mr. Speaker, sir, the grids, the people planning our renewable energy future, forecasting it as best, because they're not prophets. They're not prophets. They can't prophesy. They can only say this is what we expect would happen based on the economy performance over the period of years before. And that may have been the problem, because the economy over the years before 2018 was managed by a group of folks who had no knowledge what they were doing, how they were doing it, and sir, what the outcome would be. So we are now at a stage, sir, where there are some people who give thought to things. Don't just run your mouth, you give thought to policy. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we come to a point where in June of 2023, Town Planning Department has before it 450 megawatts of planned investment to put onto the grid. Not satisfied, the people of Barbados, sir, in their expression of confidence in this country, because you know, you don't just go to social media and listen to what a few fools put forward. You have to look at the broader things. What do people do with their money? The little homeowners, Mr. Speaker, sir, who want to put something on their roof. The person who got a small farm that want to put some sheep and have it on his farm as well, have the solar PV on the farm. Have you driven around Barbados and seen them, sir? I have. I've seen them in virtually every parish, including St. Michael. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality is that there are 333 megawatts of applications already pending approval in the pipeline. And when you add up all of them together, sir, you come to a circumstance where you have 989 megawatts in, today is what, December of 2023. 989 megawatts waiting to be put onto the grid. 200 of them, 206 of them already on the grid, Mr. Speaker, sir. And the expectation was that we only get to 280 by 2030. So we have far surpassed expectations. But having done that, sir, there's a need now for us to be cognizant of the difficulty, because the Integrated Resource Resilience Plan grossly underestimated Barbados' economic policy response. And we, therefore, are faced with, pardon the pun, gridlock. We can't upload the additional energy, Mr. Speaker, sir, until when we have done a few things. And that is why we are here. The first thing we had to do, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to recognize that there is a need to unlock the potential which we have stalled. That 980 potential megawatts of energy has to be loaded onto the grid. The question is, how do we get to that stage? We have worked with the United Nations Special Envoy for Energy, and just so that people understand, the UN offers a system-wide type of assistance to developing countries so as to unlock those countries' potential for electrical energy generation in the renewable energy sector. So we went to the UN and we said, well, listen, we want this assistance. And what's the benefit that we get from it, sir? We have already gotten a new energy transition and investment plan. Energy transition and investment. Because the Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan that we had was obsolete, sir, due to its underestimation of our performance ability. Now, as I say that, let me remind you that the Integrated Resilience Plan, sir, also contemplated a need for 206 megawatts of battery storage. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, clearly, if you are already contemplating 900 plus megawatts coming onto the grid, 200 megawatts of battery storage is not going to be sufficient. You don't have to be a specialist in the sector to understand that. So that the second challenge we have is that for the second time, the execution or operationalizing of the plan has not been, on all fours with the reality of what has actually transpired on the ground in the marketplace in the sector. At utility scale, Mr. Speaker, sir, today, in spite of the fact that we have all of this planned application waiting approval, in spite of the fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, we already have 200 megawatts on the grid, 200 megawatts renewable energy, Mr. Speaker, approved, we have only 10 megawatts of battery storage in Barbados. 10. And those 10 are located at Trent and St. Lucie on the premises of the utility itself. So therefore, the logical question now must be, well, why is it that we only have such a little amount of storage? Now, if you cast your mind back, Mr. Speaker, you will remember that two estimates debates ago when I was Minister of Energy, I rose in this place and I raised the concern then that I raise now, that at that time it was necessary for the utility to partner with government pursuant to discussions that government had already been having with the utility, so that as the utility's parent company in Mirror in Canada sought to broaden their own acquisition of renewable energy infrastructure and technology to service places in Canada like Nova Scotia, etc., that, sir, only the 200 megawatts of battery storage that we contemplated that we would need, sir, because we couldn't have estimated then the extent to which we were overperforming, that we would have it on island. Now, you know, there's only so much government could do. The records of this House will reveal and reflect the truth of what I said. And I can tell that you recall the speech. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the utility failed to move with alacrity pursuant to the discussions to get that battery storage on island is one of the things that we now have to seriously lament. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, the present scenario is that with 91 megawatts of renewable energy on Barbados' grid, the 450 megawatts additional planned investment sitting down waiting approval in the town planning cannot be onboarded if we don't have the storage technology. It means, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the banking sector in Barbados, which has committed $1 billion to underwrite the renewable energy effort in this country, is also frustrated because the banking sector has put money on one side in order to finance private investment in Barbados. And by private investment, sir, I am not talking about any of the large, sprawling investors. I am talking, sir, about the homeowner who, pursuant to the government's 10 kilowatt per household policy, the same policy that intellectually impotent individual in George Street condemned. The banks offer it at a preferential rate, Mr. Speaker, sir, access to the funding for people who want to put it on the house. And with or without battery storage, let me also make this point. I do not believe for one moment that we have been dealt as a country the fairest of hands. I am not, as I said, going to beat up on the utility. I ain't come here to beat up on any stakeholders. I ain't come here to beat up on nobody. I come here, sir, just to talk as a Barbadian to Barbadians in Barbados' parliament. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not a good thing that homeowners in Barbados would have gone and borrowed money, made commitments, some cases $20,000, $15,000, $25,000, $30,000, to put renewable energy on their roof, Mr. Speaker, sir. And my little 10 kilowatts, sir, cannot be the reason for the Light and Power not to do the connection. Come on, man. I understand you need battery storage so as to maintain your stability and maintain your frequency modulation and so on. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, don't tell me that the little homeowner with 10 kilowatts who put his hand in his pocket, made a commitment at the bank, and is not able to put the thing on his roof because it ain't, but he put it on, but he can't get connected. So he's out. He's out of pocket. And it is not fair to him. It ain't fair to the government that create the policy. It ain't fair to the minister that went out there and had meetings night after night to encourage people to buy into the policy, Mr. Speaker, sir. But the utility has to play its part in a Barbados that has been good to the utility for over 100 years. I'm beating upon the body, but I'm saying this now, and the same person who has had to defend them, I'm saying now there comes a point in time where the private sector has to step up to the plate and be fair to the country that is host to the private sector and to private enterprise. And Mr. Speaker, in this particular case, it is not a good thing. So we are at that point, Mr. Speaker, sir, where without prejudice to what we anticipate will come out of the new Integrated Resource and Resilience Plan, we believe that we are going to need, at a minimum, 300 megawatts of battery storage. At a minimum. It probably will be far more than that. Now, sir, the policy response, it is intended or designed to identify all of the avenues through which we can unlock Barbados' fullest renewable energy potential. It is anticipating, Mr. Speaker, sir, the widest cross-section, the widest possible cross-section of energy storage demand and energy generation sources, so that we have a holistic view of where the country is today, we're using 2023 as the baseline year, and where we expect ourselves to be going to 2030 and on to 2035. Party to this, sir, is the very excellent management of the projects and bringing them through the pipeline being done by the Town Planning Department, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because in all of these areas, sir, or not all, but a vast majority of the things before the Town Planning, as I said at the beginning, this country is viewing or planning development in the context of our climate resilience development as well. One is going hand in glove with the other. If you want to plan investment, talk climate resilience at the same time as you plan investment, so that if you're going, sir, to put on your hard leather shoe one morning, put on your sock as well. You understand what I'm saying? Now, what are some of the things that we have to look at in that context? We've already mentioned, sir, the home ownership using renewable energy and the expanded housing projects. I believe, 10,000? Yeah. Government's policy is, sir, unlike any of our predecessors, unlike any in the history of Barbados, this government is aiming at 10,000 homes being built, private and public, Mr. Speaker. And that therefore means that part of the discussion has to be the renewable energy generation, the renewable energy storage relationship with that type of investment. Commercial and tourism investments. There are a raft of hotels about to be built in Barbados. So much so that the young man from Christchurch West laments to me very often that he don't know how he's managing. We have just seen 425 rooms open at St. Lawrence Castle, and in the constituency of the same honourable member, sir, there's a 7-story development taking place as I speak. Indigo. And there are several others coming on stream during the course of next year, Mr. Speaker. In the agricultural sector, we know that there's an effort to do sugar industry transformation in a fundamental way, and that part and parcel of what will happen in the sugar industry sector for the first time will be renewable energy generation harnessed and annexed to the agricultural sector enterprises. Public transport system, Mr. Speaker, sir, I spoke to earlier, because our public transport system, sir, must see an improvement from the very disgraceful number of only 3 electric vehicles in public transport sector, privately held. I think there are 3 ZRs or minivans. I'm not sure which one it is, or a combination of the 2. But 800 of them on the road. The hired car sector has to be transformed as well, Mr. Speaker, sir. The network of private vehicles are 150,000 on the road today. And we may have about 5,000 EVs if we have so much. So the 150,000 got to be transformed too over a process of time. And Mr. Speaker, sir, without prejudice to the completed assessment that is being done, we believe, sir, therefore, that there's plenty of room for there to be investment in battery storage. And we appeal, therefore, to the utility to recognize that the floodgates are now open globally, and this is the time to take the matter seriously. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are additional aspects of the policy response, because as I said to you before, key to much of that we do is to recognize that Barbados is just simply too small to have the technical capacity. And one of the reasons why we have gone more slowly than most of us would have wanted us to go, sir, is because the reality is that our Fair Trade Commission works hard, very, very hard. But all you have to do is to look at the hearings, Mr. Speaker, and you will realize that a small country like this does not have the depth of technical capacity to deal with some of the issues that come along with the rapidity, the lightning fire rapidity that the country's development trajectory is requiring. So if we were keeping faith to what initially was planned in the Integrated Resilience and Resource and Resilience Plan, we would be saying, well, 280 megawatts of renewable energy on the grid by the year 2030. Fine, there's plenty of time. But Mr. Speaker, sir, with over that number in planned applications by 2023, 989 odd megawatts are in the pipeline. We don't have that time, because the consequences of not moving faster is that you are impacting $1 billion in the Barbados economy, held in Barbadian financial houses, banks, credit unions, etc., waiting to be unlocked so as to give life, a daily lived reality, to the renewable energy effort in the country. I say that, and I take time to make that point, sir, because I want at all stages to contrast what we're doing with the noises we hear out there, led by the impotent empty suit in George Street. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, but it's intellectual impotence. Maybe because, Mr. Speaker, sir, you cannot condemn a government that is trying to move swiftly to unlock $1 billion in investment and say, oh, everything to do is a rush and they're hot and sweaty. Oh, what foolishness is that? Oh, where does that fit in, Mr. Speaker, sir, to your understanding of the development requirements of the country? How does that equate to an understanding of the urgent need felt by not just the business community, but the ordinary Barbadian who is using his house, his roof, as an opportunity to generate energy and to earn income for his family, Mr. Speaker, sir? How do I tell the Barbadian who went to the bank or to the credit union and say that he won't borrow $20,000 to put 5 kilowatts on his house top, that he should stop there and not be able to get the thing connected because there's not battery storage in Barbados, which I say already is maybe a little unfair on the part of the utility. But Mr. Speaker, sir, what is really unfair is that that individual has gone and made a commitment at the bank and get money to buy the things and put on the roof door, and you got to pay it back, but you ain't earning nothing from it. And the person who is the alternative, so-called, is saying, well, don't worry about that. The government hot and sweaty. The government do things too fast. Is this what we have sunk to? Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the partnerships we build, sir, because we realize that we do not have the depth that we would like to have to enable us to move at the speed we need to move. So partnership, therefore, sir, has been sought out deliberately with global entities, globally recognized entities, which can provide technical advice and also help build human resource capacity development in the country in a new sector where there's no experience, there are not a lot of precedents, and quite frankly, sir, we have always evolved in this way in the Caribbean where, oh, this is a new thing. Let me see what Trinidad do before. Let me see what Jamaica do before. When I became energy minister, we were looking at the legislation governing the sector, the Electric Light and Power Act, as I said then was, it still is, because it has not been changed yet, but it will be shortly. We're going to Jamaica to look for the precedent. Spend a lot of time going over the Jamaica legislations, though this was the Holy Grail sent from God. Mr. Speaker, because you had either to create your own or find something that somebody do before. There was nowhere else to go to. And in the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is new ground for all of us. All of us. And in the business community, Mr. Speaker, sir, quite frankly, the business community has not shown a lot of appetite for wind technology. Do you know why, Mr. Speaker, sir? It's new ground for them, structuring the contract, structuring the contractual relationship is new ground. It was easy to do solar PV because that's a fairly simple technical thing. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the wind technology, difficult. For years, we've been locked in discussions, sir, on green energy. Mr. Speaker, and the biomass, again, difficult, first time being done. I understand that. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, we will have at some point to break free of those shackles and build partnerships, which is what we now do, and we are now doing, because the partnerships with people who know this sector and who have some expertise in this sector can only help us to build our own domestic ability. We have gone, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the International Finance Corporation to create a storage strategy. They were on the ground here during July of this year. They were on the ground here during August of this year, Mr. Speaker, sir. They have studied the Barbados, the IFC. I should not just say IFC because people may mistake that. You know, the wisdom, the Solomonic wisdom that passes itself now off as political contribution. I will stop in here and say IFC. Somebody out there will say we went to KFC. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't put it past them. So let me be very clear. The International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, yeah? On the ground here in July and August of this year, Mr. Speaker, having advised the Barbados government on the stage of where we're at, have advised that in their judgment, our market is now sufficiently mature, that we are really looking now at utility scale investment as our next stage. The 10 megawatt feed-in tariffs, which were used initially when we started out on this journey. And you will recall, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the introduction of solar photovoltaics, we used the feed-in tariff to crowd in investment. But once you come to a point where you're no longer looking to crowd in investment, that is being done, that is done already. You are now looking at utility scale, over 10 megawatts. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, the recommendation is twofold. They said around the world, people now do this by direct negotiation. You're the producer, you're selling it to somebody, this is what, negotiate your price. Or alternatively, you have a competitive procurement where you kind of bid, you put up your price, I put up mine, between myself and the honourable member for Christchurch West, the procurement rate is determined. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, we took guidance from the the FTC. The FTC's the regulatory body issued a decision on solar PV rates in Barbados between 1 and 10 megawatts. And they indicated that the feed-in tariff regime should continue until such time as the country could move to competitive procurement. So we came to an understanding, sir, based on the fact that the Fair Trade Commission itself, our consultants, the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, and in fact the Inter-American Development Bank, who renders similar advice, all agreed that we should now, sir, be looking at competitive procurement during this next phase when we want to unlock large-scale battery storage investment in Barbados. Utility scale. Now, there's a further dimension to the policy response, sir, because as I indicated to you, behind all of this is the engine that is driving us to come here today in the way in which we have done. And that is, sir, the burning need to recognize that when we say there's $1 billion of stalled financing in Barbados' financial houses, the banks and the credit unions to underwrite renewable energy investment, we are talking about the people of Barbados' money. Money that people of Barbados in some cases have already contracted to borrow. and are in some cases paying interest on. There can be no understating the urgency of being able to emancipate people from that circumstance. Because I borrow money, I gonna buy or make investment, and I can't do nothing because the utility in its sole discretion is not connecting me. But I am obligated to pay back the people I borrow from. And if I'm not earning anything, then I am driving every single passing month, Mr. Speaker. I am driving that individual into a state of debt unless I, as government, find a policy response. Do you understand that, sir? Because if you understand it, sir, and I've tried to make it as simple as I could, so that the critics out there who just idly wag their tongues will understand why we are here doing that which we are doing. Scale matters, Mr. Speaker, and as I have said at the beginning, the storage demand compared to what, for example, a Pakistan will want, compared to what, for example, Guatemala would want, compared to what, for example, Mr. Speaker, sir, most countries in the world will want, we are just going to be seen as being too small to have any significant relevance in the marketplace. And so therefore, we have had to build partnerships with people who can carry us by way of scale to the point where we want to get. I'm going to come to that. Before I come to that, sir, there's something I want to say as well. When we urged the utility for the last 2 years to take this matter seriously, when we said to private enterprise in Barbados that we need to get onshore all the inverters, all of the transformers, the battery storage technology, Mr. Speaker, sir, because this day would come. We knew, Mr. Speaker, that we were also talking about a broader global environment in which there was a post-COVID logistical supply chain weakness. COVID induced into this world's economy a crippling of our logistical supplies. Fancy language. Since COVID, during COVID, we have not been able to access things in the way in which we used to be able to access them. Because we rely so heavily on imported product, Mr. Speaker, sir. Very often that imported product coming not only from this hemisphere, but the other side of the world. We therefore rely on it being able to get here. When China shut down, but the rest of the world was open, China's manufacturing not taking place, so therefore China can't fuel the rest of the world's demand. When we opened, Mr. Speaker, sir, but docks in England were still closed, therefore nothing could move off the dock in England, therefore our demand could not be met. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is how the world has been thrown into confusion, and we are still in that state of confusion. I have said from this place, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the Ukraine war started as it did last year, January, Mr. Speaker, only added impetus to the demand in Europe for renewable energy. It lent impetus to other countries as well. And therefore, their search for the available technology in a difficult logistical supply environment, because they're asking for a more greater scale than we can ask for, they are given first priority. That was the magic behind asking the utility to work with government and its parent company, because its parent company service in all of Canada. So they have the girth to call for scale. And all we wanted to get is a little piece of that. A little piece of that action. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, where are we today? Because I want to say this to this House, not only about renewable energy, but I want to say to this country, through this House, through you, sir, at Christmas time, when Barbadians are in danger of overindulgence, that there is a very scary scenario unfolding before us. We have, sir, as recently as yesterday, reports that ships passing through the Red Sea and the area of the Suez Canal were fired upon as a result of the war taking place in Gaza, and proxy elements who are not directly interested in fighting on the street in Gaza, but interested in hurting what they see as Western shipping interests, firing rockets on ships as they pass through. Now, Mr. Speaker, some of the largest shipping companies have taken action and said that they're not going to pass through the Suez Canal anymore. Maersk does tremendous business in the Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean. They say they're going around the Cape of Good Hope. Hapag-Lloyd, tremendous business in the Caribbean, going around the Cape of Good Hope. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, that adds cost in terms of the time taken, in terms of the insurance, Mr. Speaker, sir. The consumer, when the consumer eventually gets it, is going to pay for that additional journey, is going to pay for the additional fuel, is going to pay for the additional insurance, Mr. Speaker, sir, paying for the additional time. Even as that situation confronts us, we have, sir, in the Panama Canal for several months now, but I know of no article written in the Barbados press. Not a curious journalist has raised his voice. I know of no statement coming out of any quarter in the political community in Barbados other than the government, drawing to the attention of the people the circumstances taking place in the Panama Canal. Where as recently as October, 2 months ago, there was a backlog of ships, 89 ships waiting, because the Panama Canal is impacted by climate crisis. They're not getting the rain. Without the rain, they don't have the water to raise the locks, so that the transition from the Pacific to the Atlantic cannot take place easily, especially in ships which have a deep draft. And Mr. Speaker, sir, they've got to save their water for the people in Panama to drink too. And so therefore, ships going through the canal at 4 a day. But you got 89 waiting in line, if so much as 4. So we have 2 major connecting arteries, the only two that I know of, that can move shipping, move the technology that we need here for our renewable energy, move the food that we rely on, the furniture that we rely on, the clothing that we wear, the cars that we drive, the buses, the trucks, Mr. Speaker, all the equipment in the hospital, etc., etc. All stalled, all impacted. Now, who can pay for it? Let us think it through. Let us walk the country through. Because the only people that are going to pay for it, Mr. Speaker, sir, are the consumer. And in this case, it means the people and the government of Barbados, because we are all net importers. We're not producing it down here. And that, therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, adds another dimension to this. In the case of the Suez, we are talking about 30% of the container traffic of the world. In the case of Panama, we're talking about 60%. And Mr. Speaker, sir, already I remind this House that the Barbados Light and Power 2 years ago was challenged to source inverters, challenged to source transformers. We were told as a government that we would have to be on a 2-year waiting list in order to get batteries for storage. Mr. Speaker, sir, the situation is made more acute now. That is why, because of this perilous situation with respect to global supply chains, that we go to find a policy solution that enables us to beat that hurdle as well, to overcome that obstacle as well. And that, sir, has been that we have had conversations with a philanthropic body called the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. It is backed, sir, as I said, by a number of international philanthropists. Some names you will recognize because of their prestige. So if I tell you about the Bezos Fund, I am sure you will recognize the name Bezos, and George Bezos is the man behind that. The Rockefeller Foundation, that name will not be strange to you, Mr. Speaker, sir. These are names which have been around for a long time. We understand them to be associated with billions, if not trillions of dollars. Their interest, sir, is in having the world move away from its reliance on hydrocarbons and fossil fuels. The benefit to Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir, if I am asked, first of all, is that we are able then, through that level of access to capital, we are able to pool resources so that we can, as a country, access the storage that we need. So we passed the stage now of just having the conversation, a never-ending story with a narrowly focused utility, who perhaps may have been more concerned about the outcome of the rate hearing than they were concerned about the outcome of the future of Barbados. I can't say that, but I can only say I speculate as to whether that may be the concern. But we can't wait on them, and we will not leave our hand in the lion mouth, Mr. Speaker, sir. So therefore, we had to build the partnerships which we have done in order to access the storage. In the same way, may I remind the country through you, sir, that we did with regard to the vaccines that we needed when we were in the depths of the pandemic, when we built the alliance with the African Union. Because we had to go to the African Union to secure the scale so that when we made an application to get vaccines, you were talking about such a number and a quantity that people sit up and take notice of you. You can't go and say, I want 300,000 vaccines, because men producing 3 billion. Men calling for 3 million and 10 million and 20 million and 40 million at a time. So you're a nuisance if you come and tell me about 300,000. I already got time with that there right now, you can wait. And that's how the economy works. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the second benefit of the partnership is to access leading manufacturing and leading, perhaps I should say, cutting-edge technology at commercial scale with respect to storage. As I've told you, we like to talk about battery storage here as though that's the be-all and end-all of it. People talking to the government now about pump storage. People talking to the government, sir, about using hydrogen. In fact, there is a company here set up aiming at that as its output, hydrogen as a way of storage, Mr. Speaker, sir. But above all of that, I go back to the root problem that we've been finding. Because we are so small. This is not to cast aspersion on my friends in the FTC and the Fair Trade Commission. I was their minister. Mr. Speaker, sir, I know that there are people there who are working 24, 23, 22 hours a day. Some have gone home sick with the effort. But you know what, Mr. Speaker, sir? If you have too few with the skill sets, you're going to overwork them. And unless you replenish, you're not going to be able to expand the way you want to expand. And so therefore, part of the benefit is to strengthen our regulatory capacity. And I'm proud to say that our Minister of Energy has already announced that agreement has been reached to embed storage experts, at least in the Ministry of Energy, if not also in the Ministry of Energy and the FTC. Working, sir, with the Ministry of Energy, working with the FTC in order to transfer knowledge and build the human resource capacity as they have to do in order to efficiently and appropriately regulate this new aspect of economic endeavor in Barbados. Not only should we be satisfied about that, Mr. Speaker, sir, but we should recognize that as the front runner in this regard in the Eastern Caribbean, or this part of the Eastern Caribbean, that our neighbors across CARICOM will need to have access to this kind of capacity as well. And that if Barbados is able, sir, to provide a leading role, then Barbados is able to help shape and to sell on those types of technical services, sir, to assist the development of this region. But above all of that, it minimizes this country's perpetual dependence and perpetual requirement for consultancy fees being paid, Mr. Speaker, sir, because we are building our own in-house capacity. And on that matter of paying the consultancy fees, let me remind the House that, you know, some of the biggest critics of the government in this matter are people who have charged the government extortionate rates as consultants, working for the government. Questionable amounts to show for it, but a lot of money was charged, and then they turn around and be the biggest critic of that which they helped shape. It tells you something, sir, about how people see the concept of patriotism in this country. But there'll be a time for that. I ain't come here today for that. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, the partnerships that we build, therefore, are nothing to be taken as anything to be worried about or uncomfortable with. This government has a record of building partnerships with external agencies. There is a project taking place, onshore wind, 40 megawatts of onshore wind at Lambert's in St. Lucie. I believe that should be with the town planner all right now. Approved by the town planner as wind technology, Mr. Speaker, sir. But again, Mr. Speaker, sir, we couldn't have done it without the same International Finance Corporation, IFC, private sector arm of the World Bank, working with us, sir, to structure the transaction, because it was without precedent in Barbados. And what we do, sir, now is to work with Rockefeller and the Inter-American Development Bank to source a transaction advisor who will be the entity, a globally recognized entity with the requisite amount of experience in order to manage this course of competitive procurement on behalf of the government. In the same way that we work with the IFC, sir, in order to get us to where we are now with 40 megawatts of wind, passing town planning for investment in wind technology in Lambert's in St. Lucie. When I first heard about Lambert, St. Lucie, Mr. Speaker, sir, it was about 30 years ago with regard to wind. I heard about a windmill that was put up there. I was keeping a lot of noise at night, and somebody was trying to see whether this thing could work for wind energy, and I heard it would never work. There was a member of parliament who came in here and behaved as though he owned St. Lucie, MEC St. Lucie, and that as far as he was concerned, you can never see it in St. Lucie. And Mr. Speaker, sir, where are we now? We have approval for 40 megawatts of green energy to supply this nation's well-being in the same Lambert's in St. Lucie. Collaboration, sir, through international agencies to get us to this point. Collaboration in this case, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the Inter-American Development Bank in terms of building a competitive procurement framework, collaboration with Rockefeller and the Inter-American Development Bank to source a transaction advisor to help us manage the transaction. Mr. Speaker, sir, and what would that include? It includes some of the basics, like making sure you have a transparent way of initially expressing your interest, making sure, sir, that there's a transparency in the process of issuing your request for proposals, making sure that there's a standardized approach to procurement practices, ensuring, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there is competitive pricing so that the consumer of Barbados ultimately is the beneficiary. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to emphasize again that this amendment, which is before this House, is really an amendment targeting not just the small, not the small household level type of technological application for storage. But Mr. Speaker, sir, this is contemplating utility scale, 10 megawatts and over. Competitive procurement, sir, is a globally accepted approach to the resolution of this type of procurement. It is foreseen in a decision of the Barbados regulator in a judgment issued by the FTC. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it has the vital potential of helping us quickly unlock $1 billion of stalled investment in the financial houses of Barbados and facilitating the development, sir, of the country's renewable energy ambitions. And last but by no means least, ensuring, sir, that the well-being of our consuming public is looked after. For all of those reasons, Mr. Speaker, sir, issued to you during the course of the last hour and a half to 2 hours, I want to say that we see this piece of legislation as being the solution to the gridlock that is now taking place, the solution to the stalled investments that are backing up and frustrating investors in Barbados. The solution, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the delivery of government's democratization of the energy sector. Because it was this government, Mr. Speaker, though much maligned at times, it was this government and only this government that saw the energy sector as being an opportunity to give to the ordinary people of Barbados a chance now to be owners of the process. It was this government. And the democratization of it has been frustrated by virtue of the fact that because we don't have storage, an excuse exists for the utility not to make connections. Well, that excuse must disappear. We have come here, we have said candidly what the problems are, we have put the solutions before the country with an intention to make the obstacle disappear so that once again the people of Barbados can revert to being the owners of the electrical and energy delivery endeavor in this country and being the principal beneficiaries of the profits thereof. I want to ask, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this legislation be commended to the House, and I beg that it be read a second time.
Honourable for Christchurch.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to entirely support the proposed legislation, the legislation before the chamber. I once had the misfortune, twice had the misfortune of speaking after the first speaker, sir. One was on a political platform, and one was at a branch meeting. Each time, sir, by the time he had finished, he had covered what he was supposed to cover, covered everything else, covered things that flowed from it, covered things that were contemplated by it, and left me with almost nothing to say. That, sir, is a rather enviable position to be in. But as a former Minister of Energy, I feel that I actually need to weigh in as well, supplement some of what he said, and to provide a little bit of an understanding. Sir, we are limited in our offerings for renewable energy, and that needs to be understood at the beginning. Other countries that have other options for renewable energy, thermal energy, offshore wind, things like that, they can actually generate their energy consistently. So the sources of their energy operate 24 hours a day. Right? If it's geothermal, the heat and what you're using to generate the energy happens 24 hours a day. The wind, to the extent that they have it, happens pretty much 24 hours a day. It has some slow periods. Sometimes the wind will drop, but there's potential for it 24 hours a day. Our difficulty in the Caribbean, and in Barbados in particular, is most Bajans associate renewable energy in Barbados with solar. A lot of people don't know that Barbados was the country that pioneered solar technology. I think it was Solar Dynamics that first introduced solar heating of water. Now it is something that we take for granted. Almost every house in Barbados, every facility heats their water by solar. Some use natural gas, but solar is by far the preferred option for heating water. We allowed ourselves to fall a bit behind the ball and allow other people to take what was our initiative, develop it, and now we buy it back from them. But in Barbados, renewable energy equals solar. There comes the natural limitation with respect to renewable energy in Barbados, sir. Because the sun comes up, let's say half the day. So for half of the day, you can generate energy. You can generate electricity. The other half, you can't. A grid cannot operate like that. If we are looking to move to 100% renewable energy by 2030 or as soon thereafter as practicable, then we have to make provisions to be able to supply that energy 24 hours a day. Interestingly, sir, I think the majority of energy is consumed in Barbados in the night. So that's when people go home, people in the fridge, people turn on TV, people turn the AC at home, people do what it is that they have to do, and they generate electricity at night. But that is the time when based on our system and our traditional source of renewable energy, the generation is not there. So it means that we cannot divorce ourselves at present from the fossil fuel inputs because the energy still has to be provided in the down period. It's called intermittent energy. It means it doesn't happen all the time. And the logical filler for that is storage. Storage comes in many different forms, but the most commonly contemplated form of storage is battery storage. We use batteries in our devices. We know it's a portable form of energy. You pick up 2 batteries and you put it in a radio, and the radio comes on without plugging it into the wall. Our cell phones, sir, we charge them, and then we walk around with them, and we have access to the energy supply to run into cell phone wherever you are, whatever it is that you're doing. So it's no different, sir, with batteries. Initially, when battery storage was devised, the batteries were huge. The batteries were large and cumbersome, industrial scale. Batteries, sir, required large resources to land and to be able to house them in tremendous warehouses. This is sort of like the evolution of the computer. My first computer, sir, was about, the box was about this big, and then it had a little TV on top of it, right? And you couldn't carry that nowhere. That was there, and it operated at 0 speed. Now, sir, my entire work is done from this. This types my documents, this signs deportation orders, this reads briefs, this carries speeches, this does my research. And it is small, but way more powerful than the first computer ever had, or have had access to. In the same way, sir, batteries have now come. The evolution of the battery is a fantastic thing. You now have multi-cell batteries, sir, small little component batteries. So it's not one big thing for battery storage. You have small components to make a larger battery. I'm trying to speak it as non-technical language as they can get, sir, because other people listening need to understand where we're coming from. What that has done as well, sir, is made it even more accessible. There's a member, sir, the Honourable member for Christchurch. Actually, I don't want to identify him, but one of the Honourable members in this house, I think, is off the grid entirely. And he could not be off the grid was it not for the evolution of the battery. So he is able to generate all of the electricity for his house from solar. And he's able to store electricity for use at night. And then it gets recharged again while also using directly from his panels. And we accept as a country that to fully go the whole way to renewable energy generation in Barbados and consumption in Barbados, that we have to have both components of it. Otherwise, we get stuck halfway. The problem, sir, when we contemplated our renewable energy program and the ambitions of this government to become fossil fuel free by 2030, it was thought at that time, how can we incentivize Barbadians to take up this offer? How can we incentivize credit unions? How can we incentivize commercial Barbados to invest in this? And being a part of the process at that point in time, I know we were trying to figure out what incentives can we give to encourage people to take up the capacity. We did not, in our wildest dreams, sir, believe at the time that the subscription and the buying into the policy would have been what it is. The feed-in tariffs, when we were initially looking at setting the feed-in tariffs and the negotiations around the feed-in tariffs and the discussions with BREA and all the stakeholders, we tried to set feed-in tariffs that would have encouraged and lock them in for a period, that would have encouraged people to see this as a viable and valuable investment in their future, an investment in our infrastructure. And the feed-in tariffs were generously set to encourage the pickup onto the grid. So like any other business, quite often in the teething stages, it either makes you or breaks you. If you achieve some sort of commercial success or commercial viability, then it can help to propel you as you put more and more investments in. But it is critical that when you start up with the program, that you get buy-in in order to allow the program to go forward. Nothing cripples a business or cripples an initiative, sir, like inertia at the beginning. When the feed-in tariffs were announced and they were set, sir, we were not prepared for the overwhelming response of corporate Barbados and savvy investors, a lot of whom were private citizens, a lot of people who had roof space. Roof space now became a valuable commodity. At one point in time, a roof was a liability. You only looked at your roof when it was leaking. You put up a roof on a house, you put up a roof on a warehouse, and that became a liability, degrading. That now became a rentable commodity. Persons have rented roof space from other people to put solar installations on their roof space. Persons now have wiped out their entire electricity bill and are pocketing returns on their investments so that make any other investment in Barbados look woefully inadequate. This is big business. It has been fully subscribed. It has been eaten up, and we now have a problem. We have a problem that we have as much capacity that we can deal with. When the sun is out and all of those buildings are generating electricity, there's only a certain capacity that light and power can actually absorb and put into their system. So we've come to a point, sir, where we have as much going down that pipe as we can deal with without something else being brought into the mix. Something else has to happen now in order to allow the investments to continue. So we have a number of persons, sir, who have gotten a license. A number of licenses were issued. I can't tell you how many, but there are a lot of licenses issued. But there are even more applications for licenses pending. And until there's either the capacity to handle all of that coming in, or a way to store it and use it in the off-peak hours, then we have a problem. So here we are, sir, at the contemplation of battery storage. Now, how do we regulate that? How do we decide on the pricing? How do we decide on who should get what? How do we decide on all the factors that end up with a price to the ultimate consumer? It is thought, sir, that feed-in tariffs are not appropriate for this now. Feed-in tariffs have done what they were supposed to do. They incentivized it, they initiated it, they galvanized it, and they've done what they're supposed to do. We knew at the beginning that feed-in tariffs would have been for a period. We knew at the beginning, sir. That period has come and it's gone. How now do we work out the pricing for it? How now do we decide who should invest or who should get the licenses? How now do we decide what arrangements are made for utility scale generation or storage? So we're at where a lot of the rest of the world is. Auctions. The Honourable Minister called it what it is referred to technically as competitive procurement. It's the same as anything else, sir. It's like tendering. You want to provide a service, okay? Put all your cards on the table. Tell us what it's going to cost. Tell us what the price is going to be. And we can then make a decision as to whether you or somebody else. In our next phase, sir, we are now looking not at where we are and what is now on, but at what now powers the rest of Barbados, pretty much in perpetuity. Because the aim is to eliminate the consumption of fossil fuels in Barbados. And that consumption can only be eliminated where everything that is currently run by diesel, by gas, by heavy fuel oil, by bunker C, right? Everything that is powered currently by fossil fuels needs to be within our contemplation to be powered by electricity. That now, sir, takes us from 2023 into the future. So we are now dealing with even a larger scale of input into the grid and a larger scale of utility than we've even seen up to this point in time. How do we deal with the pricing and the acquisition of that and the procurement of that in a way that does not hurt Barbadians? The good thing about the amendment, sir, is that it allows a cap to be put, a maximum starting price. You can say, we want to take persons or options to supply electricity to Barbados and Barbadians. We are not prepared to pay above X dollars, $10 per unit. That is our ceiling. So all who are interested in this come forward now and bid. You know that the ceiling is $10. So you work out your numbers and give us a price that can make you a profit, but cannot choke Barbadians. You know the ceiling is $10 per unit. Let's hear you. It forces people to look for the best pricing. If we contemplate, sir, that there's no collusion in it, it forces people to look for the best pricing. And that has the potential, sir, to drive the price down. It is you trying to get the best deal for you, while also factoring that the best deal for you must also involve the best deal for Barbadians. It allows the credit unions to come in now. It allows the large-scale utilities. It allows for, I guess, co-ops. And when I say co-ops, I just don't mean credit unions, but I mean co-ops in the sense of people joining together to pitch up, because I might not be able to compete in that space at 10 megawatts. But if myself, Minister Simmons, Minister Moore, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, if we pool together, we might be able to enter that space, because once again, we can do so knowing that it can't be above this. Let us play in that space and make the application. Now, sir, why was the amendment necessary? We have to be able to be nimble in this space as well. We have to be able to be nimble. The current legislation, interestingly, sir, allows, it sets out a number of rules that have to be followed, a number of things that have to be proved, a number of hoops you have to jump through in order to get licenses. We cannot right now have installed, because we're at a stall right now. Right now, there can be no more licenses issued because we don't have the capacity to accommodate any more electricity. We now need to be in a position to not be putting out feed-in tariffs, not be waffling around, but be able to make very nimble decisions within a confined contemplation that allows us to accelerate storage in the same way that we initially accelerated solar. I have heard some people say that the amendments to the legislation take away powers from the FTC. It takes away the ability of the interveners to intervene. I've heard all those things, and it gives the minister the authority to bypass certain sections of the legislation. Well, sir, to be honest with you, if the same people who are complaining about that were to read the existing legislation actually contains a similar provision to the one being complained about that allows the minister, in certain circumstances, to bypass parts of the legislation. And I think we have a culture of hysteria, sir, that persons believe anything you give a minister power or authority to do something, it automatically harkens to corruption. Maybe it is that we have become so jaded by the years 2008 to 2018 that we look for the demon behind every door. You know and I know, sir, it is an administrative decision. The decision to issue a license is an administrative decision. An administrative decision has to follow certain rights and rules in relation to natural justice. And more important than all of that, it is subject to review. So while the minister, the parameters within which the minister can exercise his discretion, or her discretion in this case, are set out. It has to be in the public interest. At the end of the day, it has to be in the interest of the public. Now, sir, we know that the public interest is something that is measurable. It is arguable. It is defendable, and it is capable of a definite interpretation. It is not up to a minister because I like the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, and because he got enough money, and because some may come back to, I saw him do a double take on that. All right, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West or somebody like him. But it is not simply that I can decide because I want to issue my friend a license to do it in a way that I didn't do it for somebody else. I have to get past the public interest hurdle. But not only get past the public interest hurdle, but I also must be able to defend my decision against other decisions made. The AJA, Administrative Justice Act, says that decisions of the executive or administrative decisions are open to contest in a court. It has to be fair, and it has to be defendable. Sir, if I actually go to the clause itself, once again, I'm opening my office, sir. The provision already exists, and it has not been abused. The provision is reinforced. I think it is a little bit stricter this time around, but it is necessary because of the circumstance we are in. Right now, our position is ambitious. We're trying to get everybody to have electric cars, right? I think Quartz is probably now selling more electric stoves than it is gas stoves. We have started that shift. Everything that we're doing contemplates the use of electricity as opposed to fossil fuels. Our buses, right? We have the highest, people don't even know we have the highest penetration per capita of electric vehicles in this hemisphere. Little Barbados. Every single thing that we're doing contemplates us pushing towards our 2030 stated agenda of becoming 100% fossil fuel free in generation of electricity. We started with a bang. When I was a minister, I remember I came in, sir, there were a lot of applications backed up when I had initially become a minister. And we went through a lot of applications. I know my good friend, sir, the Honourable Member for St. James Central. I know my good friend dispatched a lot. I know the Honourable Minister from the other place, sir, who's currently the Minister with the Portfolio for Energy, has gone through a lot. And there are a lot more. Whatever capacity there is now, there are probably applications that triple the existing capacity of the grid. They have to be dealt with, but they cannot be contemplated because there's nowhere to put electricity. If we even, sir, think about it. So, Barbadians look at our electricity poles, and I don't think they understand fully what they see. So, at the top, sir, you have the distribution lines. So the distribution lines bypass areas. So they take electricity from the point of generation to somewhere well down the line. So I may be trying to send electricity, sir, to the Honourable Member for St. Peter. I am the generator of electricity. At one point, it comes off the distribution and it goes to feeders to service the Honourable Member for St. James Central. Further down the distribution line, it comes off again and it goes to the Honourable Member for Christchurch West to satisfy his requirements. And it keeps happening that way until we get all the way down to St. Peter. People keep asking, why is it that so many people got licenses for generating solar, but I can't get in my area. Because your area might not have the capacity to deal with it. Your area might not have the infrastructure to get the electricity you generate from you into a suitable point in the grid that can actually handle that capacity, because all areas don't have the same capacity. So once again, we have to be able to store it and to regulate it until the grid is upgraded, and at some point in time, so it has to be. We have to upgrade our grid to handle a lot more, because if we're going to be 100% generating renewable energies, sir, then the grid itself has to be upgraded. It wasn't so long ago, I know this is a touchy subject, but it happened when I was a minister, when we had the issue, sir, when the grid went down. And it was, I remember having a meeting with the Prime Minister at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were outside Light and Power, out by Spring Garden side, and she was meeting with everybody, and Bajans lost everything. And it was that enough upgrade and maintenance of the infrastructure had not been done. But sir, in that scenario, I am sure, sir, that you at home were still cooking your food because you probably have gas. For those who had electric stoves, nothing wasn't going on. You couldn't cook anything. The meat spoiled in the freezer or in the fridge. We were down for a while, and Bajans got some understanding of what would happen to us if a natural disaster ever visited itself upon Barbados. We were without electricity for a couple of days, 2 days. And that 2 days was catastrophic for Barbadians. A lot of things happened after that to try to shore up the infrastructure, to make it a little bit more reliable, to make it less susceptible to failures. But that was back then. We are further in our generation of renewable energy. We have more people wanting to come on board, so it's not just the energy that Light and Power itself can control. It's not just the energy that Light and Power itself supplies onto the grid. It now has to make provision for other independent power producers, for other persons who want to come in. Our entire grid capacity has to expand, and that can only happen, sir, with also an investment in infrastructure and upgrading of the grid generally. But while we're contemplating all of this, once again, we're at a bottleneck. We're at a bottleneck, sir, because right now, if we can generate 10 units of electricity in the day, and we can only generate 2 or 3 units at night, we have a shortfall. We can never weed out the fossil fuel, because the fossil fuel has to make the difference in the off-peak hours. So something has to happen in there. I know we're looking at pump storage, sir. What is hydro pump storage? Pump storage is when you use electricity, energy, to push water to a higher elevation. And then you release that water, and that water comes down, it turns turbines, it generates electricity through hydro and kinetic energy. But instead of using the water itself operates as a battery, you store the water at the higher elevation until such time as you need the energy, and then you allow the water to come back down again and generates the energy on the way down. So that's one thing we're looking at. So we also are looking at pairing any significant energy installation now must be able to provide the energy 24 hours a day. It has to. So we now need to pair, sir, as a matter of course, our battery capacity with our generation capacity. Because if you're generating a day and the grid can't take all, then you put that somewhere and you hold it until such time as you can bring it in. That is quite practically what it is that we have to do. We have to be able to generate, we have to be able to store, so that Light and Power or whoever is the grid operator always has sufficient capacity to serve the country. Until we get to that point, we cannot phase out fossil fuels. So our ability to fulfill our promise to Barbados and to the world about becoming fossil fuel free must necessarily include battery storage. So in the same way that we moved very quickly at the beginning to try to populate the renewable energy sphere in Barbados, we now need to move exceedingly quickly, sir, to get the battery storage in order. Once the battery storage has come online, once licenses for battery storage have been issued, then we can start to issue generation licenses again. So our advancement of our policy, our highly touted, highly stated policy, depends on us being able to provide the storage to back up and supplement the generation. That is it, pretty much in a nutshell. We took a business and practical decision at the point of inception to have the feed-in tariffs because that was what was called for at that point in time. Right now, sir, we feel the need to to move past feed-in tariffs now, sir, to the competitive procurement, which would involve the auctions, allow people to bid for the rights to have the licenses, allow people to bid to be able to supply electricity at a certain cost. That's where we are. But equally, all of the advisors indicated that at this stage, it may become necessary to move quickly to be able to see this through. It is necessary to be able to issue those battery storage licenses in very, very short order. And that is where the discretion of the minister comes in. It is not intended, sir, that the minister is going to bypass the legislation at every point in time. That's not what is contemplated. But the realities in this sphere, right, when you have supply chain issues, when you have an inability to guarantee certain inputs, the ability to make a very quick decision and to reserve that right to an authority or a body is a real consideration, and it is necessary for business efficacy. And quite practically, sir, the only body that can probably move nimbly but still be subject to the oversight of the courts and following the requirement, the stated requirement to actually operate in the public interest is the minister. And once again, I make the point, and drill home the point, sir, that authority already exists. Nobody complained about it before. I guess people didn't even realize it was so not abused that nobody had reason to even know that it was there. It is not contemplated it's going to be abused again. But we, as a responsible government, in all of our PR for it, we put it out there. We don't do things behind closeted doors. This has been the most upfront government Barbados has probably ever seen. Everything out there, everything we do is put out there for public scrutiny. That's why we get such lashes. Some people say, sir, that we are a little bit too honest, that perhaps the Prime Minister consults on too many things. Right? I've heard that. But that is her way. That is the way of this government. Let us put it all out there. There's no mystery. There's no subterfuge. Let's put it all out there and have a discussion as to what is the best way forward. We have heard the comments in relation to this legislation. We have heard the comments. The comments are there. We are addressing them here. Well, having heard them and addressed them, then, quite frankly, sir, we know the ball is in our court to operate in a certain way. And you can never cut out the interveners. Social media being what it is. I noticed, sir, one of the key interveners, one of the most prominent of the interveners, had their full say recently in social media. But, sir, social media is probably now the most effective intervening tool in Barbados. We're not bypassing the FTC, but the provision has to be there to make decisions when expediency is required. We're not trying to bypass the interveners because the normal regime is what it always was. It is just that for exceptional circumstances, this provision applies. And so in most pieces of legislation, it also has provision for the minister to exercise his discretion or her discretion in certain things. And it would be a very foolish minister to exercise that unjudiciously, injudiciously, and willy-nilly. Because I don't think, sir, with the scrutiny that happens in the cabinet itself, that a minister who decides to do his own thing and run off on a product of his own can look forward to being a minister for very long. So the safeguards, sir, I think are naturally built into the process. Having said all of that, I think I hope that I've clarified some of why it's necessary and some of how it operates and the fact that we're actually at the critical point now. In order to fulfill our ambition, we need to move, and we need to move now. We know that we have a lot of generation. We know that we've stalled and that we need storage. We need the other piece of the puzzle to take us another step forward, to be able to have more generation. We know that's where we are. So we had to make amendments that reflected our current position that were not necessarily contemplated at the time that we did the initial legislation. So having said all of that, I commend my friend, the Honourable Member for St. James Central, who took us from the origins to the teething, to the puberty, to adulthood. And we are now, sir, looking forward to the future of renewable energy in Barbados. And I think that these amendments help to take us there. So with those words, I am happy and proud to support this legislation. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Microsoft Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will not be long. I rise to add to this conversation, I hope, to contribute to this conversation. Because, you know, as I was listening to the Honourable Member who led the debate and the member who followed him, it occurred to me that Barbados is in a position today that we, for a very long time, wished to be in. And that position is one where we dare. Is one where we dare to actually test and try and step out into the world to find our fortunes again. I know this may sound like the beginning of a fairy tale or a story, but it's not. I'm being very sincere and very practical when I say this. Certainly for me, it felt for a long time, and they say that those of my generation are something called Xennials. We're not quite Generation X, and we're not quite millennials, those of my age. We happen to be in that cusp where we saw what no technology was like, and we came of age in a place where we had access to technology. So we know both worlds. So we can give a perspective from both positions. And certainly for me and those of my generation, for a very long time, Barbados felt like a taker of things other than price, like a taker of policy. We were waiting for people to tell us what to do. And very much aligned to this notion, to this expression that I will confess I don't have a lot of time for. And so you will know that there was a time, probably still is, when you would ask somebody how they're doing. And they would say, man, I hear poor, peaceful, and polite. And I really loathe that expression, sir. Because it says to me that we feel like we should just be content with this little lot in life. And not that there's anything wrong with being poor. And I've said in many fora, as someone who grew up working class and from a working class family, that there is no shame in poverty. But at the same time, I feel as if Barbadians, almost in our quality, had begun to feel, and a lot of it had to do with the way that we had been educated. Because I feel as if we had been educated for a very polite civil service to say, okay, well, we're going to go and do the people's work. And Barbadians have shown that that is not who we are. We like to dare, and we like to try, and we like to innovate. And so in this area of work, there's a lot of innovation. And I feel as if a government who dares, a people who dare, will not always get everything perfectly 100% right on the first try. But we have to be willing to dare. Because if we sit and wait for people to always tell us what to do, then they're going to tell us what to do when it suits them. When they've already left us in a certain position and they've secured their first mover advantage, then they'll look back and say, oh, y'all could come now. And so we have to be willing to dare. Now, what we will not do as the group of people elected and appointed to care for the well-being of a country, what we will not do is take unnecessary risks with people's well-being. That is important. So one must dare, but one must do so responsibly and without taking unnecessary risks. And so I've watched the evolution of this work, where, sir, much like with COVID, in many ways the whole world is guessing. And I feel like this legislation shows that Barbados is learning. It is taking note of the lessons, taking note in some cases perhaps of some of the missteps, which it wouldn't be unique in having made relative to any country that's in this sector, and all countries are in this sector. So it is from that perspective that I just want to share a little bit about what should concern us and what should not concern us with respect to this work. The honourable member who led, the member for St. James Central, spoke quite a lot about the international climate context and the climate summit, the annual climate summit from which he has just returned, and what the conversation and the mood there is about. Certainly finance and the way that the international financial architecture arranges itself to deal with the climate crisis is important. I would not want us to be too gleeful about the loss and damage fund and then so gleeful as to take our eyes off of the rest of the conversation. I think the establishment of that fund has been a landmark establishment and is critical. I think the idea of keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming alive is also critical. The commitments that we made under the Paris Agreement remain very important. So the issues remain important, the issues of finance for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the issues of finance for adaptation, so making sure that countries like ours can withstand today the increases in warming, and finance for loss and damage. The fact that we already have historical loss and historical damage from what has so far transpired. So all of those conversations are very important. The macro level finance conversations are very important. The question, for example, of whether we can redirect fossil fuel subsidies away from where they are towards some of the work that we need to do, all of that is critical. In my own work, sir, in this area, and my own work over the last 2 years with other countries, with other institutions outside of Barbados, there's something else that is also critical. And that is the whole idea of green industrial policy, which is what we're talking about today. How are we really going to be effective in bringing about this green transition that we're talking about? And the green transition really is moving from this reliance on fossil fuels to being able to fully embrace and use renewable energy technologies like solar and wind and so on. Now, the whole issue of the green energy transition is not just about having countries reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and embrace renewable energy technology. One of the things that you will hear a lot is this notion of a just energy transition. A just energy transition. Because in everything that we do, the thing that we focus on has to be equality. It has to be about whether, at the macro level, at the country level, whether countries are being left behind, and at the individual level, whether people truly will end up with affordable access to energy. That's the conversation, you know. We are not here trying to pass any exam to say, well, by this year, we've reduced our emissions. By this year, we are only reliant on renewable energy because it is some artificial target. The Honourable Member for St. James Central, who's paying such rapt attention as I speak, has said to you in his intervention what Barbados stands to gain economically, financially, socially from this transition. And so it is not just a question of, because the world has said that this is the direction we're going, we're following. There are real gains. There are real ways in which we can make people's lives better, but we have to keep our finger on that button of making people's lives better and getting cheaper energy and more reliable energy for all. And in a minute, I'll tell you how a green energy transition can start to take place and that not happen. So the question is, what does this just energy transition look like? One of the ways that those of us who are working on these issues, that we feel it has to evolve, is that countries are not just takers of technology. That's easier said than done. But one of the things certainly is that we do not just look, for example, to the EU and to the US to develop the technology according to how they want to develop it, to create all of the high-value jobs there in their geographical space. And then the rest of us say, oh, thank you so much for creating this wonderful thing, we will pay you for it. Countries of the Global South have to be involved in the actual transition to the new technologies, creating access to jobs and everything involved in that advantage. Because you're not going to tell me that you made your billions during the Industrial Revolution at the expense of our air quality and of our people and the exploitation of their labor, and then you're going to leave us behind again when we come to this new industrial revolution, one that is a green industrial revolution. It can't happen twice, surely, sir. And so the question is, how do countries like ours, how do countries in the Global South really participate in that? That's one level. But the other that we are concerned with here today is the question of whether there's equality in ownership of the renewable energy projects and whether people will end up with more reliable energy for which they pay less. That's the question. And so this government has determined that in order to bring some order to the mad scramble to get in on this sector, it will go the way of these competitive bidding programs, which we know as auctions. That's really what it is. And auctions, as we all heard from the honorable members who spoke earlier, are really now the go-to method for moving to utility scale capacity to generate renewable energy. Now, in my short intervention, I just want to say a little bit about, from an economic perspective and really in this space, what this has generated across the world. Because auctions are not new. Competitive bidding, first of all, this is just procurement. This is a procurement method. Countries all over the world have been procuring things for years, including the government of Barbados. So this is not new in that regard. And price has often been used as the deciding factor in these auctions. So you determine who has the best price in order to determine who gets the award. And that is true, sir, of most procurement. It is not the only procurement method, but a lot of our procurement is based really on best price. And so the idea is that on the basis of this price-based procurement, when you're focusing on price, a country is able to drive down the price of these renewable energy technologies and therefore drive down the cost of energy to the consumer. The idea is, so the competitive bidding is an auction. And so it is really one in which price is the focus. And I mean, the point of auctions really is to be able to have some transparency. It's called price discovery. What does that mean? It means that everybody has to put on the table what their price is likely to be. So the idea is that you're trying to avoid collusion. You're trying to make it very clear in a context of limited resources that a government has. You're trying to get everybody to show their hand as far as price is concerned. This is something, I mean, I first started hearing about competitive bidding for renewable energy probably around 2006, 2007. So this is something that has gone on for a very long time. But the idea is that if you are able to make price very transparent, that is going to drive down the cost of the projects. That is going to drive down the cost of the projects. It's going to drive down the costs of the technologies and the implementation of the technologies. There needs now to be another transmission mechanism, another pathway by which driving down the cost of the project to execute means driving down the cost of energy to the consumer. One does not necessarily follow the other unless we are very careful to make sure that that happens. Now, when it comes to the question of the cost of energy to the consumer, I think that governments often have to determine whether they are going to try to address the direct price to the consumer or whether they're going to say, look, the consumer is going to benefit indirectly because the state will be paying less for fossil fuel. Every government has to decide that. Some determine that the cost of energy to the consumer is farther out of their hands than they can have an impact on, and the focus is going to be reducing the fossil fuel bill so that the savings that we make, we use to invest in health and education and housing and making people's lives better. That is a decision for the government to make. Because one does not follow necessarily from the other. Driving down the price of a renewable energy technology does not always, although it should, but does not always lead to a reduction in the cost of the energy generated from the execution of that project. So that is something that we have to keep our eyes on. But the bigger concern in the literature, the bigger concern in the research and in the work that some of us are doing on these matters is whether auctions lead to market concentration and market dominance. What do I mean by that? If you are a large firm, a large energy producer, a large producer of renewable energy technologies, chances are that you are extremely competitive on price because you are executing projects in different places. And so that allows you to be far more competitive than a smaller operation that has higher operating costs as a percentage of their profits and so on. And we know this, we see this all the time. We see this in any industry. And so the concern for those, for development economists like me and others is, wait a minute, is focusing on price going to mean that we only allow some of these larger operators? It becomes a question of ownership. I know that ownership is very important to this Barbados government. Ownership, economic enfranchisement are the things that for us make a difference in a small economy like this. Ownership matters. It is not just a question of getting a wage, it is being able to have control of an asset that can generate value over and over for you. Ownership of a home, ownership of land, ownership of any investment instrument, ownership matters. And so, to the extent that this government's renewable energy plan focuses on ownership, focuses on the democratization of the sector such that individuals are able to own renewable energy assets like solar PV on their roofs and generate income from it, then we have to be concerned about whether auctions contribute to market concentration of larger firms that come in and say, well, I got the best price. And I'm putting this on the table because this is the concern. I'm putting this on the table now because somebody next week, the following week, even as we speak, is thinking about it and saying, but hang on, these auctions sound suspicious. And so a lot of work has gone into looking at whether, in the research, looking at whether these auctions really are a problem for market concentration. South Africa has been doing this since 2011, and there are those who might say South Africa might not be the best example because South Africa has significant load shedding issues now, which mean that there are power cuts all the time and energy security is a problem. But South Africa, Denmark, Zambia, Colombia, these countries have been dealing with auctions and using this approach for a long time. And they've taken the time, as the Honourable Member for St. James Central suggested, other people have walked this road before, and it is not that they're going to dictate to us what to do, but certainly we would be silly not to learn some of the lessons. And so there are some lessons to be learned. Countries like Zambia and Germany and Colombia tried to deal with this issue of market concentration, and they ended up with higher prices for projects. So let's confront the issue squarely. The price question is important. The price question is important for Barbadians, sir, who are looking to transition to electric vehicles. Because I talked to some of them who are not sure that the economics, the finances are going to work out for them. And so that is why I talk about the boldness of a government, to be able to step out and say, look, we're going to test these waters and see. We're going to do some forecasting and see. Is the price to the consumer going to be lower or not? And we're going to come, like the member for Christchurch, he said, and just put the information on the table, and you can determine. So I wanted to move very quickly, sir, to the fact that a lot of the research shows that there are ways to avoid these challenges. The work on South Africa showed that there are ways to avoid the happening or the likelihood that using an auction means that only large firms come in. Because again, small society, your mandate is ownership and enfranchisement you want to make sure that you're not walking in the right direction. And I'll say this. I am happy that this government has attracted the interest and the partnership of those whom it has attracted. And we always need to be in a position to critically consider what is being put before us. And so, notwithstanding all these partnerships, which are tremendous, we always need to be in a position to say, well, I thank you for this information. We have determined that A will work better than B for us. And so design of the auction is key. So what has been found to work well from a design perspective is, one, to have a schedule of auctions. That is going to sound very obvious, but predictability and information is what often makes your design better. It often makes sure that people can't collude. It makes sure that people can't rig their bids and so on. Schedule of auctions. A schedule of things is important in lots of sectors. Some would argue that a schedule of maintenance of buildings is important. Some would argue that a schedule of road works and repairs is important. The more information you put into the public domain, the less is the likelihood that people will make economic mistakes based on the fact that they didn't have the best information. Volume disclosure on what each project is likely to produce is important. So a schedule of auctions, when these things are happening, who is likely to be involved, volume disclosure, the price ceilings that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East made reference to, those are very important in avoiding people getting together and rigging their bids so that one or the other can come in and be successful in the project. I mean, I don't want to sound paranoid or suspicious, but the whole business of procurement and economic management is exactly what the member for Christchurch, for St. James Central opened his remarks with, is to avoid a certain mischief that just sometimes attends to these things, because government is the good faith actor here. Government must be the good faith actor. But that's not to say that every actor is a good faith actor, and government has to play that role. Penalties for those who do not come to the auctions in good faith. The rationalization of administrative procedures. We all know that the easier it is to enter into a process and to leave it, the more likely that process will be effective and successful. And then the question of making information available to prospective bidders and to other stakeholders. Sir, I wanted to enter the conversation in this particular position because I feel that there will necessarily be a discomfort with a new approach. It is not enough to say Germany has done it, South Africa has done it, US has done it. It's not enough, because those who are looking on will feel that Barbados is different and is special, and we have to protect it. But if we shield ourselves so much from the rain, if we lock ourselves away in a bunker so that we don't get a little sprinkle, we won't know when the sun has come out. And so, while I understand that this may seem like a new approach, I wanted to be able to give some perspective from my own work on how countries have done with it. The fact that for several of those countries, they have had to change design and change tack. They have had to set up, for example, officials and colleges of negotiators and peer review councils that will actually look at what some of the international institutions are suggesting and consider whether it works for our context and what are some of the additional things that we might consider for Barbados and for this part of the world. So, sir, I support the direction of this government in this regard. I encourage the forecasting and the forward planning because I think that there has to be a balance of acknowledging that this is a new sector and that some things you will learn from its evolution, but also doing as much planning and monitoring of market activity as you can. Our market right here is very small. You can, when I say small, I mean you can cast your eyes left and right and up and down and see how the market is moving. And I think that the lesson here is that we perhaps strengthen our market surveillance to see what is coming on stream and what does that mean for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road. I think that is a lesson here. I think it is well learned, and I think it will only serve to strengthen the work of the sector going forward. I support this amendment, sir, and with those few words, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
Oh, it's on. Thank you very much. Oh, I see. Yes. Now, I did promise this chamber and the country something of an intervention that will be legalistic, abundantly legalistic. And I've asked your forgiveness if it is boring. We come here today as a parliament to amend the Section 37. The Act, and we call it the Parent Act, let the public be elucidated on these matters. It is an act that describes itself as one to provide for the regulation of utility services, What that means is that there has been established in this country a Fair Trading Commission that seeks not so much to control, but to regulate, because that's what the Act says, to regulate utility services. And when we speak of regulation, we speak of pricing regulation, the price to the consumer, because we come here to defend an interest of the public at a time when pricing is potentially traumatic to many families, to many individuals in this country. So let us hear the disquiet. Let us accept the concern. And let us try to respond in a manner that will give the public some satisfaction that we are not on the road to some form of tyranny. I can say to you, sir, that it was attributed to Plato, the old Greek philosopher, these words: show me a democracy, and I'll show you a tyranny in the making. And I feel satisfied that we have lived in a democracy since independence. And if the public now believes that our democratic traditions are being eroded by parliamentary intervention into previous acts, let us listen to the public. Let us engage that disquiet. Let us engage those concerns. And let us not resort to contemptuous dismissal of what the public has said. Indeed, Your Honor, even in the other place, I believe it was last week, there were concerns expressed by a member in that body. Let us engage them. Now, I came here this morning and I asked for the Parent Act. We are amending Section 37 of that legislation. I listened to the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, and he made the point that there is already some provision for ministerial intervention into the question of applications that come to the Fair Trading Commission, and that's correct. That is correct. Now, let us read Section 37 for the sake of the public. The public needs to know what we do, what we come to do, and what is the result of those deeds. Section 37 of the Utilities Regulation Act reads as follows. A service provider may apply to the Commission, and that's the Fair Trading Commission, for A, the utility service that it supplies, or B, any part of the utility service that it supplies, to be exempted from the application of all or any of the provisions of this Act where the service provider can establish that the market for the utility service supplied by the service provider is effectively competitive. Let the public know that this Utilities Regulation Act is speaking about the Fair Trading Commission. We all know now, and the public knows now, that the Fair Trading Commission is the body, the legal body, that regulates pricing by service providers, by utility service providers. Let us explain that. Now, Section 37(1) makes provision for exemption from application on a condition, on a precondition, that exemption may be sought where the service provider is effectively competitive, so that every exemption in the Act, and this is the Act that was passed at the beginning of this century, outlines or provides a precondition for exemption where the Commission finds that the service is effectively competitive. Let us go to subparagraph 2. The Fair Trading Commission shall consider whether the utility service supplied by the service provider should be exempted and shall make a recommendation to the minister. That's a power given to the commission and obviously their deliberations as to whether a utility service should be exempted, and the commission shall make a recommendation to the minister. Let us speak honestly. Subparagraph 3. The minister may, on the recommendation of the commission or on his own initiative, exempt the utility service supplied by any service provider or part of that utility service from the application of all or any of the provisions of this Act, where the minister is satisfied that the market for the utility service supplied by any service provider is effectively competitive. Again, Your Honor, the precondition for exemption expresses itself to be that of effectively competitive, where the minister or the commission believes one or the other, where one or the other believes that the market is already effectively competitive. One or the other may say, look, let us not expend public expense or public time in having hearings and that kind of thing. The market is effectively competitive. Let us press on. And obviously, one would not expect that that applies to Barbados Light and Power, because we know that lurking beneath this discussion is the activity of the Barbados Light and Power Company. Don't feel squeamish. That is the reality in this country. That electricity generation goes to the heart of every industry, every household, every individual in this country. And don't feel squeamish when I say to you, Your Honor, that the price of electricity is high in this country, that it is at the heart of hardship. So let us not feel squeamish on these matters. Let that matter that lurks beyond this debate, let it come to light. And let us address the public frankly and say to the public, we are aware as to your pain. We know why you're hurting. We know what you feel is at the center of hardship in this country. The cost of energy, the cost of electricity. That is how the public feels. Let us meet them frankly. Your Honor, I have spoken as to the existing law, where the precondition is about a market that is already effectively competitive. This is what today's amendment does. Let us read it. And no one need feel any discomfort in here or outside. When we come to this place called Parliament, we are duty-bound to tell the truth. And this is a truth that will hurt no one in here nor outside. This, Your Honor, is the proposed amendment. The minister may, on the recommendation of the commission or on his own initiative, exempt the utility service supplied by any service provider or part of that utility service from the application of all or any of the provisions of this Act. Here comes the condition. Where the minister is satisfied that the exemption is required in the public interest. The fundamental departure made by this amendment is that we move from a precondition that was addressing the matter of competitiveness.
Honourable Member.
Beg your pardon, sir.
Honourable Member.
Do I have the right one?
Yes, I'm asking.
Yes, 4, subparagraph 4. I got it from this Parliament. I hope this Parliament is not misleading me or you.
Is it correct amendment?
I trust that I have the correct document, sir.
Is it correct amendment?
But the honorable member for Christchurch East did say that this one relates to public interest. It's correct? Thank you. I'm obliged to you, sir. So that, Your Honor, let us meet the public, as I said, with honesty, with integrity. And say to the public that the previous exemptions were based on matters of competitiveness. Today, our amendment is based on ministerial intervention in which the minister is given the power, and people don't like the word power unless they're using it. But he is given the power to determine what is the public interest. Where I depart from the legal opinion of the honorable member for Christchurch East when he says that public interest is easy to define. Respectfully, I beg to differ. Public interest is a creature of difficult definition. What is public interest? But I'll come to that shortly. I think the public generally and largely now feel that there is an erosion of the right of public access to the Fair Trading Commission. What the honorable member for Christchurch East reminded, and I listened to every word he said, he was very sober. He reminded that there are limitations in access to the Fair Trading Commission. There are existing limitations in access to the Fair Trading Commission. What I want to say to him through you is that this limitation, I said it before and I'll say it again, it's worthy of repetition. This limitation is now based on a different precondition, that of public interest. That a minister now has the discretion to determine what is public interest. I could ask all of us in here, including myself, to define public interest. As many persons as are present, we may get as many different answers. Now, Your Honor, in my days of study, as a student that is, I sat at the feet, I believe, of Dr. Francis Alexis, the Caribbean's leading authority on constitutional law. That was an event that took place from day to day, so it was not remarkable. The proudest moment I enjoyed in association with Dr. Francis Alexis was when I had the pleasure, the privilege to sit next to him at a bar table in St. George's Court in Grenada. And therefore, I feel proud to bring the work, the learning of Dr. Alexis to this august place. And he, when asked to define public interest, something that I admit to this Parliament is somewhat difficult. Nebulous is the word used by the honorable member for Christchurch West. He said, public interest concerns matters of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, and public health. I sat and I studied what Dr. Alexis said, a revered figure in West Indian constitutional law, and I wanted to add to that. He, though, added, upholding the rule of law, and I want to come to that presently. And my own addition to public interest is protection guaranteed to the broad majority, which includes financial protection. Because the citizenry of this country need financial protection. And that is the purpose of the Fair Trading Commission, to guarantee to the citizenry of this country that any utility provider, and there's no bias here, any utility provider which comes to that commission seeking an increase, and that increase must be paid by the public, that they must have the guarantee, they being the public, that the rule of law will protect them, and that ministerial discretion can become a little hazardous. We all know, Your Honor, I believe you, people in this country believe that you are a criminal lawyer exclusively. They don't know. I have come here and quoted land law, and you have responded with knowledge and erudition. You too are a public lawyer. Let the public know that, and that is why I feel comfortable addressing these topics under your speakership. We know that discretion, and we're talking about ministerial discretion, is always at risk that it may become unfettered. Discretion is perhaps a child of power, a thing we like to have but don't like to admit it. So many people love power, but they like to disguise it in the clothing of compassion and care and all kinds of beautiful words. But power is just what it is. Power is that capacity to determine how the lives of others may proceed. And contained within that power, properly exercised, is this thing we call discretion. But there are times when discretion becomes at risk of being unfettered. And you know, Your Honor, that when it becomes unfettered, it is unlawful. And who determines the unlawfulness? The courts in this country, not this Parliament. And I heard my friend from my colleague from Christchurch East say to this Parliament today, I listened to every word, that we should not worry because the courts are always there by way of judicial review, and he's so right. You can go to the court for judicial review. What I would respond and say is that you should not legislate with a promise to the public that if you're not satisfied, you go to the court. Legislate with confidence. Legislate knowing that you are doing the right thing. And I ask my colleagues in here today if all of them are satisfied that we are doing the right thing in giving ministerial discretion to one person, supposedly, or according to the text of the amendment, where that person is empowered to do it in the public interest. Now, there are times when discretion exercised or power exercised may collide with what we call the core values of the Constitution, the core values. And where within the Constitution are those core values contained? You wouldn't open the Constitution of Barbados and see the words core values. You would not. I'm happy that my esteemed friend and colleague from Christchurch West is treating this as something of an introductory lecture on constitutional law, and I'm obliged to you. Thanks for listening. The Constitution of this country, as with all countries, does a number of things, but broadly speaking, a constitution establishes the institutions of state. That is to say, this place, the Parliament, the Cabinet, and the courts. I say this in here so often that it may become a cliche, but I want my colleagues to know it, to understand it, to understand where they sit in a position not only of privilege, but of power. And to admit that you have the power. We're here amending a law today that has stood for some 20 years. Let us put ourselves in a position where we can give justification to the amendment. And I appreciate my friend, he's my learned friend from Christchurch East, in attempting to give that justification. And he did it with sobriety. But let me go back to the Constitution of this country and its expression in relation to political, to its core values. And core values are essentially those political and moral values that surround the written word, that surround the institutions that the Constitution establishes. This then brings me to read the Constitution. The public needs to know this. Now, Your Honor, you are aware that the preamble in our Constitution has for years not been treated as an area of the Constitution upon which you go to court and ask to have that enforced. For a while, it was said, oh, it's just a declaration, it's just declaratory. But that the main or the effective portions of the Constitution are, begin at Section 1 on citizenship, and then it goes on to say what are the fundamental rights and freedoms, and then it establishes the judiciary, the parliament, and the cabinet, and so on. And other institutions like the various commissions, teachers' commissions, public service commissions, and so on. Demystify this thing. Let the public know what the Constitution is about. And that is what it is about. Permit me, though, to read that preamble of the Constitution. Now, therefore, the people of Barbados, A, proclaim that they are a sovereign nation founded upon the principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, the dignity of the human person, their unshakable faith in fundamental human rights and freedoms, and the position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions. That will not be a portion of concern today. B is the portion of concern today. Affirm their belief that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect for moral and spiritual values and the rule of law. I will come back to the rule of law in a matter of seconds. Permit me to travel to C within the preamble. The people declare their intention to establish and maintain a society in which all persons may, to the full extent of their capacity, play a due part in the institutions of the national life. I wonder sometimes if that is not a constitutional definition of democracy. A declaration that the people state their intention to establish and maintain a society in which all persons may, to the full extent of their capacity, play a due part in the institutions of their national life. Is not the Fair Trading Commission an institution of their national life? Let us listen to the disquiet. Let us respond as lawyers and as fair lawyers and say to them, if you are disquieted, here is the law. I want to come back to this thing called the rule of law and what it means. A lot of people believe that the rule of law, that word rule is a noun. Some believe it is a verb. And there is confusion. There's a lot of confusion as to what the rule of law means. We know that the rule of law is about a principle which expresses that all persons, the law applies to all persons equally. That's the operative word, equally. And that law is the Constitution, the law that we come here to make from time to time, and the common law. that none of those laws, none of those areas of law, constitutional, legislative, or common law, there is none of those laws that does not apply to everybody equally. We are all equal under the law, from the highest station in life to the lowest. The law applies equally to all. That's what the rule of law is about. But there's another branch of the rule of law, and it has particular relevance within this debate, that the rule of law rejects arbitrariness. The rule of law rejects arbitrary power exercised particularly by public officials. There must be no arbitrary exercise when one is applying law. Again, let us meet the public and meet the public fairly and candidly. If you have a fear that this amendment will promote the arbitrary exercise of power, what say this Parliament? Can this Parliament justify today what it is doing? Can this Parliament give the public the guarantee that a ministerial discretion exercised in the public interest is not at risk of becoming arbitrary power? Who will answer? The public wants answers. And the public wants answers on this matter. Again, as I said, not as any academic expedition, but because energy bills are causing them hardship. That is the bread and butter connected to what we do today, sir. And we owe the public answers. I asked the minister in your presence, sir, is this a safe amendment? And if he answers, this one, the honourable member for St. James Central, if his answer can guarantee to the public that there is safety, perhaps the public will hear him. But I feel that these matters need to come into the public domain, and we need to be men and women of courage who will meet a public discourse, and not only meet it courageously, but that we will meet it honestly. And the fact of the matter is that we are dealing with legislation which is not only given discretion, but is on the province of power. And sometimes the only people who enjoy power are the people who have it. The subjects of that power enjoy it only when it is lawfully exercised. And the Constitution of your country, Mr. Speaker, rejects in its declaration the arbitrary exercise of power. That is the rule of law that they feel, they, the public, believe that trespasses against the rule of law. That's not how they're going to articulate it. But we as lawyers are duty-bound to say what is the law, whether we are in Parliament or on White Park Road. And I want to say to you, sir, that the man on White Park Road is the same man when he's in here. And if I argue something on White Park Road, I argue the same thing in here. I am not given to any schizoid behavior when it comes to my opinions on the law. The law is the law is the law. Let us give the public some answers. Now, Your Honor, I don't know how much time I have left. I suspect.
You suspect? Tell me your suspicion, I remember. What is your suspicion? What is your suspicion? I want to say
2 minutes.
You're spot on.
Spot on. So that, being spot on, sir, I will close by asking all of us in this Parliament. We were sent here by the people. The people sent us here. We didn't pay to come in here. Should I amend that? I did not pay to come in here. Yes. I did not pay to come in here. We did not pay to come in here. We came in here because people had confidence in us. It was not about any love affair. They wanted us. They wanted this parliament to pass laws for the peace, order, and good government of this country. And good government includes the right or the necessity for us to make the public comfortable with everything that we do in here. And if I say to you, sir, if the public is uncomfortable, if there's disquiet, let us give to the public the satisfaction that what we do, that the extension of a new section, a new subsection to Section 37 is a safe extension, that it is justified. Well, I will end on this one. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East said that resort can be had to the court. He's right in that. You know the case Annis Minnick. Even a law passed that seeks to exclude the court cannot exclude the court where the person acts unlawfully. Annis Minnick versus the Foreign Compensation Commission. You're such a good lawyer, sir. I don't know why they're calling you a criminal lawyer. You're a total man, a total lawyer for all things. And so I want to say to the public, I will join the member for Christchurch East in this one and promise to the public that if it is felt that there is any infringement against the rule of law, and if this amendment causes any erosion to the ideal of democracy that this Constitution defends, please find your way to White Park Road. We already them on that one. Find your way to White Park Road, except that we should not be passing law with the apprehension that we are doing wrong. Let us feel confident. Don't tell the public, go to White Park Road.
Sir, I'm raising a point of order.
Honourable for Christchurch East.
The honourable member is...
This is a point of elucidation that you are coming on.
No, the honourable member is misleading the chamber, sir. I don't know about anybody else, but seeing as I'm the person who he's referring to most, I am not here seeking to pass any law with any apprehension that I am doing wrong at all. I made it quite clear that I thought this was in the best interest of the energy sector for the reasons that I stated. And up to now, I have not actually identified a significant point of departure between the honourable member's submissions and mine. So just for the record, I am under no apprehension that we are doing anything other than good in the passing of this amendment.
Perhaps the public may now feel satisfied.
Honourable, can you kindly wind up?
Yes, I'm winding up. Perhaps the public will now feel satisfied. I'm sorry that the honourable member now feels a similar disquiet to what is obtaining in the public domain. You done?
Sir,
Honourable.
I raise on the same point of order. There is no disquiet within my bosom. My conscience is clear. When I come here to speak the truth. And as the honourable member alluded, I am the same person, whether I'm in White Park Road, operating as a servant or officer of the court, as I am right here, operating as a servant of the people and an officer of the parliament. There is no disquiet in my bosom. I am perfectly comfortable, as I believe most in here are, with one perhaps notable exception, that this is in the best interest of the energy sector and the people of Barbados and to drive commerce. I don't think it could be any clearer than that.
Can you conclude, Honourable?
Yes, no more than 15 seconds. And we are all now grateful to the honourable member for exposing his bosom, having so cleansed it And with those words, let me express my appreciation for the time you've given me. I would like to say.
Honourable Member St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to wrap up debate on this very important matter. I should perhaps, sir, begin by thanking those honourable members who spoke and contributed to this debate. I don't think that in the speeches of either the honourable member for Christchurch East or the honourable member for St. Michael's South Central that there was anything that I need to specifically respond to because they differed both in tone and I suspect approach from that of the honourable member for Christchurch South, my learned friend. And I'm indebted to my learned friend, Mr. Speaker, because I believe, though, knowing him, his speech may have been rooted in an element of being in a mischievous mood this morning. He has opened the door for us to reflect a little bit on that which he calls public disquiet. I myself, sir, was not aware and would not have described myself as being aware of any level of disquiet. But as I listened to him articulate the matter, I believe that we could say, simply put, that there may be an element of doubt as to the course that is being taken by the government. Sir, the Fair Trade Commission, I think we can agree, is required to set, under this proposed legislation, maximum rates. The honourable member for Christchurch East would have indicated that that is a point above which or beyond which we will not go, and therefore confidence can be reposed in the Fair Trade Commission for continuing to do that which is its requirement in law, and that is to ensure the well-being, financial well-being of the consuming public in Barbados. There can be no gainsaying that. The mere fact that the maximum rates are going to be set by the FTC means, sir, that at the back or at the root of it all is the consideration of the well-being of the people of Barbados financially. Above and beyond that, Mr. Speaker, sir, let us not ever lose sight of the fact that the reason why we are on this journey for renewable energy is to make sure that the consuming public of Barbados is spared the price volatility, the constant increases in prices which have impacted the same consumers in Barbados from time immemorial. The reason why we are on this renewable energy course, sir, is because, as I indicated at the very beginning, we are talking about energy bills in the country, importation of the fossil fuel, that was at $580 million in 2018. That is the last year, $940 million. This year on a trajectory to surpass that. We are talking US currency, Mr. Speaker, sir. And so therefore, the government is not in any way apart or set aside from the concerns articulated by the honourable member for Christchurch South. We are ad idem on that. We are together as one mentally. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, equally, the Fair Trade Commission is going to be looking at the, the rates charged under interconnection and other types of agreements for electricity supply to the public grid. The ministerial power which is proposed in the amendment to Section 37 is intended to exempt the supply of electricity from a renewable energy provider from the provisions of the Act only so far as the exercise of discretion by the minister is lawful. I am not sure that I am, or let me put it this way. As I listen to the honourable member for Christchurch South, I want to suggest that it is not practical for government to legislate on a presumption that there will be an abuse of power, either by a member of this government or by a successor government. I am not sure, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it is wise to legislate on the anticipation or presumption that ministers will act in an arbitrary and lawful exercise of their power. We understand, sir, that these things can happen. But if we were to adopt a worst-case scenario in every piece of legislative endeavor, then, sir, we would never get anything done. That is the reason, sir, why there is an Administrative Justice Act. That is the reason why, sir, we have a court system set up independent from the legislative structure as an independent body, Mr. Speaker, sir, which then allows me to stand here and answer the honourable member for Christchurch South and say candidly as man, yes, members of the public, this minister feels that this is a safe journey. This minister feels that this enterprise does not in any way erode access to the court, does not in any way erode or cause there to be a fear or apprehension of wrongdoing. Quite the contrary. We're saying that in the interest of the public, ministerial discretion should be exercised so as to do a number of things. Enable the electricity sector, sir, to be able to perform better, unlock stalled financing investments in this country, which are vital to the national interests and the national development of the country as a whole, take off of the backs of the taxpayers and the consumers in Barbados a $1 billion United States dollar burden, which we carry by the perpetual reliance on importation of fossil fuel. The longer we fail to get this renewable energy enterprise to its conclusion, sir, the longer the country carries that burden. And equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, we do all of this in the certain understanding that there's a continued access to the courts of Barbados. Ministerial exercise of discretion in the public interest, howsoever that is defined, I heard the honourable member in this matter, and I respect that it is a difficult thing to define, but it is not for me to define, nor, sir, is it for you. Nor, quite frankly, is it for the honourable member unless he is using this place to signal a future intention to sit elsewhere. It is, Mr. Speaker, sir, a matter that is at the root of that exercise which we who are called to the bar call judicial review. Correct. And as to whether the exercise of discretion adheres, sir, to administrative laws and administrative law considerations, sir, as the honourable member to my left is pointing out, there is always going to be the checks and balances. And that is what the court is there for. We are not legislating in a way to stop anybody getting to the court. There will always be an avenue for that. And Mr. Speaker, sir, in the absence of irrelevant considerations, the law will stand. If there are irrelevant considerations taken by any minister of this government or a government to come, then the courts will determine that. And that is all that this is about. Now, if the honourable member for Christchurch South felt so fondly of me that he wanted me, sir, to be in a position to say here to the House and by extension to the country that the journey we are on is one about which the whole cabinet and the whole government, Mr. Speaker, sir, feels tremendously confident, and that this is going to give us the solution to the challenges which we have been confronted in the energy sector. And Mr. Speaker, sir, through you, I thank the honourable member for Christchurch South for allowing me to do that on behalf of the government. And sir, I ask that without further ado, this matter, sir, now be read a second time.
Wait a second.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Honourable James Central.
The bed move, sir, this matter be read.
No, sir, leave the chair.
Sorry, I beg, sir. The honourable member is still distracting me, sir. The bed move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Wait a second.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This honorable House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
Make second.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
Make second it.
Is that clause 2 stand part? All honorable members in favor, say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report. Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you report to His Honor the Speaker the passage of 1 bill in committee.
Make second it.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of 1 bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of 1 bill in committee. Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the bill be read a third time.
Make second.
Question that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and be cited as the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill 2023.
Make second.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this afternoon simply to adjourn this session. It has been a long session indeed, not just today, sir, but I think for the entire year. I know that honorable members are quite weary and have been working exceedingly hard over the past few months to be able to complete a lot of the agenda of this administration. I want, though, to take this opportunity to thank the people who support us in this chamber and who allow us to be able to do the work in the name of the people. The clerks that are present with us constantly in this chamber at the head table, all of the ancillary staff, sir, because outside of this room, there are those in the engine room who ensure that we're able to prepare for Parliament and to allow others to appreciate what we are doing here. I want to also thank all of the other staff that support us in terms of the Royal Barbados Police Service and certainly the other security. Barbados Police Service, as well as the other security personnel who are also facilitating us while we are here, sir. All of the janitorial staff who support us as well. I would also want to thank the catering staff, sir, because they ensure that while we are delivering the people's business, that we are appropriately watered and fed. And of course, the honorable members of this chamber, I would also want to wish them as well a happy Christmas and indeed a prosperous new year also. We have done a lot of work, sir, tremendous work in this last term. Work that I know when we look back on the record of certainly this administration, I think we've slowed down a little bit in the last few months, but certainly over the course of the legislative agenda, I don't think any administration can boast of the amount of work that we have been able to put out during our tenure. As always, sir, it is important that while we are passing laws, that we are also making an impact on the people of this country. And in everything that we do, we try to ensure that that certainly happens. Of course, when it leaves this place, it is for those who have to enact to ensure that things are implemented. But certainly our intentions when we meet as a cabinet is really to add value to the lives of the people that we have been given the opportunity to come here to serve and in whose interests we work. Let us not forget though, sir, the reason for the season. I think a lot of people get caught up in sometimes the shopping, sometimes the the parties and all of the other festivities and often forget the reason why we are celebrating Christmas. It is a season for giving and sharing, and I hope that we will not lose focus on that as we go about our celebrations and festivities across our various communities over the course of the next few weeks. As we look forward to 2024, again, we do so, I think, in a period of reflection where we look at the achievements that we have been able to accomplish up until this point, but also looking and reflecting, sir, at the year ahead. I think in looking at the year ahead, for me, it has to be all about what have we not delivered on that we must do so in 2024, because there's still a number of things that we owe it to the electorate to be able to deliver on. And I think across all of government, that must be the approach, to complete the things that we have started, as Prime Minister often says, to stay the course and to ensure that we are able to deliver to the people who have certainly sent us here. So, sir, I want to wish each and every person in this place, but also across Barbados, a happy Christmas as they go about safely their journeys over the Yuletide season. We've lost a number of supporters in the last few months in particular. I think many of us thought that COVID perhaps dealt everybody a difficult blow, but we've also seen in the last few months a lot of sudden deaths, which I know at this time of the year is particularly difficult for our people, because nobody likes anything to happen quite sudden. You often like to be able to prepare for loss. But we have suffered both as a party, we've suffered as a parliament, we have suffered as a country in terms of the losses that we have seen. Sir, as Minister for Public Works, I certainly would want that we can complete a number of the projects that we have started, and I look forward certainly to a level of enthusiasm from within certainly the ministry that I have control over, to be able to now deliver on a number of the things that we've been working so hard on over the course of the last few months. We do so in the memory of Mr. Philip Chuda, who would have led the ministry as the Chief Technical Officer. And allow me to say, sir, that has not been an easy journey over the past few months. But it is certainly my hope, with the assistance of the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, that we can certainly deliver on our end of what we know we have to do certainly my ministry. And I'm sure that is the reflection. If you ask any of the other members, that there are things that they want to deliver on, so long as God gives us the strength and the tenacity to be able to continue on this journey, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to 2024. I think we have set a blazing trail in relation to the establishment of our committees, the social and the environmental and the economic committees, to be able to demonstrate as an administration that we are willing to dig a little deeper on legislation. We are willing to communicate with the public and to listen to the concerns of the general public. And I think that is particularly important, sir, in an environment where people often feel that their views are overlooked. I suspect the child justice bills, the child protection legislation, those will come in the new year. And we have obviously had a lot of activity in terms of the ability of people to contribute to those pieces of legislation. And there are plenty others you'll see on the order paper. There are plenty others that are coming for the new year. And we will continue on that vein to be able to educate and keep the public generally informed. It is also my hope, sir, that at some point I can speak in peace without the disruption of honourable colleagues as well, disrupting me on the floor. The good thing, though, sir, is that I've had the benefit of opposition, so I'm accustomed to the asides, and I can therefore speak over the asides. But I do believe that it is important that as we close this session, we do so with a certain reverence of silence, since we are coming to the end of a year, and I would hope that good behavior would prevail for 2024 on behalf of all of my colleagues. Sir, with those few words, I want to thank you as well for delivering in the way over this and presiding over this chamber in the way that you have. and to thank you for being generous at times with members, even though I know it has been particularly difficult for you as you preside over these sit-ins, but to say a special thank you to you and certainly indeed to your family as well as we celebrate this holiday season. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'll give way and then come back on the adjournment.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, revert to messages from Her Excellency the President.
I am in receipt of a message from Her Excellency the President. Her Excellency the President to the Honourable the House of Assembly. Her Excellency the President wishes to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly that she will be absent from the country during the period 21st December 2023 to 3rd January 2024 on vacation leave. Her Excellency further wishes to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly that in accordance with the provisions of Section 33 of the Constitution, the Very Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Douglas Gibson will perform the functions of the Office of President for the period of Her Excellency's absence. Signed, President, State House, Barbados, 19th December 2023.
Revert to government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with those few words, I would therefore wish to adjourn this session for its Christmas vacation until the 23rd of January, 2024 at 10 a.m.
Before we adjourn, I wish to inform the chamber that the alarm went off, but the investigations were done and there's no danger. One can rest assured. I don't know if it was as a result of the tete-a-tete between various House members that caused a transpiration of heat to exude from the dishallowed chambers. But everything is cooled down now, sir. There's no cause for concern. The question is, before we adjourn, I also wish to wish all honorary members a prosperous 2024 and a rested Christmas. I also wish to thank the ancillary staff for performing so remarkably under some very strenuous and strenuous conditions. We could not have sat here for an entire year without the diligence that you have performed, especially at the clerk's table and the marshals and the ancillary staff. I wish everyone a very blessed Christmas and prosperous 2024. And what you did not attain in 2023, I hope that with God's blessing that you will accomplish everything that you asked for. The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until the 23rd day of January 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd day of January 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.